So, greetings, our dear participants. Right, so welcome to the National Conference, Circular Economy for Business Development. This event is taking place under the EU for Environment Action in Ukraine, funded by the European Union and implemented in Ukraine. My name is Katerina Romanova. I am the expert on communication and popularization of RECP, and I will be your host for today. And now, to officially kick off the Circular Economy for Business Development Conference, I would like to ask Mr. Gregory Tsouris to speak, Counsellor on the Green Deal at the Delegation of the European Union to Ukraine. Mr. Gregory, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katerina. I'm really happy to address and open this very important conference, which I think in a way is talking about a new area of a new growth opportunity, a completely new way of doing business. That we are trying with your help to bring a bit closer to Ukraine as well. So very quickly, I think I am sure that the participants today have heard about circular economy before. I would like just to give you from the perspective of the EU why there is such a focus on circular economy and where the opportunities lie. So it's first of all, it's a key pillar of the European Green Deal, which is the EU's economic strategy for the next 10 years. I think there is a firm belief, and this is what I would like to share with you, that the economy of the future, the economy of the years 2030, close to 2030, 2040, 2050, will be a decarbonized one and a pollution-free one. That means that there is going to be at least one big market, which is a market neighboring Ukraine, the one of the EU, that will be requesting and asking for products, primary material, but also finished products that meet some standards which are evolving over time and that are now getting into the inclusion of sustainability criteria. So recycling material, recycled material, reused material, certification of the source of origin of the first materials, and this is where, I mean, a big opportunity for Ukraine exists, at least in some sectors. There is obviously the co-benefits of reaching a stage where we are collectively rethinking our way of producing, our way of putting into the market and working with the afterlife of products creates quite a lot of new areas of work. Some that are already being used, taking advantage of. I think of metal scraps, for example. This is not there are already business cases for quite a lot of elements that are seen as waste from process today, but this, I'm sure, can be expanded quite broadly. The tendency, so in the EU, is really to have more information about the products that will be put on the market, including on the packaging of products, how much carbon they include, and what is their sustainable impact. So how much recycled material they include, how easy it is to deal with them once they are produced, reused and recycled. So this is a clear tendency that is being already put in motion by having a legislative framework in the EU that is being set up. The Fit to 55 package is completing the picture that we had before with the Eco Directive and other elements. And the overall idea is really building upon the building block of having knowledge about what your current waste is as a company, extending the responsibility of a company not only in putting something in the market, but to what happens to the afterlife of products. So the real building block, which we still need to see in Ukraine be put in place, is a waste hierarchy, or the Waste Framework Directive, which is overdue still. But that would bring the first element, which is a key element of extending the producer's responsibility in what happens after the putting in the market a product. Also, it allows for centralized elements as centralized entities to have a knowledge at any moment on what type of material is being put on the market, where they are, how much is a waste, and how much is an input for other processes, and make business out of that. So the tendency is to increase these areas in the EU. This will probably happen in Ukraine as well once the framework directive kicks in. Extension to packaging, and also working with difficult material. So there seems to be a market for almost every waste that we have seen. Very few cannot be used. Then it's a matter of making a business model around. But I'm pretty sure that with the help of the project today, we'll see practical ways of doing that. And I really want to say that we are available also for companies. Feel free to approach us bilaterally at the EU level. We're interested also in hearing what are your thoughts, what are your issues with moving ahead with this way. I think by your presence today, you are showing that you are thinking already about the future in a future market that will be set up, at least in the EU, in a positive way. And we are here to help you as well. So good continuation. Thank you very, very much. And looking forward for an interesting discussion and presentations later on.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite the coordinator of the program, EU for Environment at the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, and the state expert on resource efficiency in industry at the Directorate for Pricing Policy and Development of Regions, Ms. Viktoria Kovalenko. Please go ahead. Yes, greetings, colleagues. It is my pleasure to welcome you at today's event. I see a good number of participants, so it's pleasing to me to see that the topic of circular economy is so relevant and so interesting to many parties. On behalf of the ministry, I would like to say that we are well aware of all the advantages of implementing circular economy principles in Ukraine. We understand the future positive impact that circular economy will have on the economy, the environment, and on the well-being of the population. I want to separately thank you for the video you've just demonstrated. I think it's been incredibly informative, very interesting. And what's most important, it was also brief. This is a very positive thing because in 5 minutes, essentially, you've been able to cover all of the big bullet points as regards circular economy. You've talked about its advantages and the various elements. So thank you very much. That's a great piece of media. Thank you for being here and for developing such great information materials. Continuing the conversation about circular economy and specifically moving on to what the Ministry of Economy is doing, we are currently in negotiations with the European Union delegation, with the United Nations Development Program, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, in our efforts to support the implementation of the principles in Ukraine. We see the advance of this. We understand that this is a necessity, in fact. We understand that there is still a lot of ground to cover. So we are incredibly grateful for the fact that your center, the RECP Center, is one of the flagship entities dealing with this issue. We are aware that you are very serious in your approaches, and we are hoping very much that we'll be continuing our collaboration, and I have no doubt that we will be successful. So thank you very much for your attention, and I want to wish you all a very fruitful meeting and a fruitful discussion. I have no doubt today's event is going to be interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Tatiana Chernyavskaya, the EU for Environment Project Manager, representing the Directorate for Environment and Energy at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Thank you, dear colleagues and representatives of different organizations. This morning, we are here to have a very special follow-up on all the activities which UNIDO is supporting in implementation under the EU for Environment action, which is a 4-year action implemented by consortium of international organizations in the Eastern Partnership countries, including Ukraine. And it's a great pleasure for me to admit that Ukraine is a front runner for UNIDO experience in this region on implementing resource efficient and cleaner production. We are very grateful to the European Union for support of regional programs, of national interventions, financial support. And we would like to confirm that we have all the methodological approaches which UNIDO, as an industrial development organization of the UN family, is promoting, having its mandate to have inclusive and sustainable industrial development. For us, sustainable development goals, and in particularly the goal 9, which promotes industrial development, innovation, and infrastructure, is at the core of our activities. And of course, other goals like improving the sustainable consumption and production, and to improve the, of course, the well-being of people are also the goals which we have to follow. For that, the thematic area of circular economy, which we do see as an industrial economy, the economy which is driven by the economic sense of making products and materials available in the economy and circulating as long as possible, is at the core. Our mandate to support industries, to support small and medium-sized enterprises, which are, of course, the backbone of any economy, as already confirmed, and in particular in Ukraine, where about 90% of enterprises are exactly representing that size and type of businesses. We think that returning products and parts into the value chains several times, introducing principle where products are designed to last and maintain value of materials and products as long as possible are at the core. Of course, we cannot avoid speaking about waste, and we already had colleagues speaking about waste hierarchy and the need to prevent waste by all means. So we are promoting the need to have products designed by industries, by industrial enterprises to last, so that waste is not generated not only during the production, but also as a result of use of those products. So here we are speaking also about sustainable consumption, which is already designed in the product as such. We also, of course, promote use of renewable energy and introduction of it along the value chains as much as possible, and minimization of waste and pollution is, of course, what we look forward to. Work in Ukraine and other Eastern Partnership countries with industries shows that bringing this business case and showing that industry is not the bad guy in this case and in this sense, but rather an opportunity giver as an employer, as a job generator, as a front runner for competitiveness and productivity in the countries. That's our message, that we would like to bring business case of circular economy, of sustainable production as the case for growth and opportunities which are available through those measures. We have several approaches which we introduce in this regard, including individual work with enterprises, including work with groups of enterprises, and we will speak about this today at the conference. At the regional level, we have industrial waste maps introduced, and we really face issues with data which is available in the countries. We face issues with openness of businesses, but in this regard, I would rather underline that it is our main priority to make businesses and industries reluctant and give the priority to the productivity and new approach as a circular economy as an option, as an opportunity rather than as challenge. And thank you to the EU representative here for mentioning that, yes, the issues of market availability for the products of Ukraine is very, very important. And those markets are driving the needs and changes in the industrial enterprises, in the products. For the first glance, of course, we are speaking about export production, but we should also consider that export could be a driver as a competitor on the internal local market. And in this regard, we are planning also to launch activities dedicated to product environmental footprint, which is a technical means of or alternative for considerations in industrial production to approach the single market in EU for green products. And in this regard, we are encouraging industries to consider joining that initiative as well. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sure that the global agenda which UNIDO is also bringing to Ukraine through our activities, in particular climate change issues, which are also dependent on how we consume and, of course, produce what we are consuming, is also relevant to today's discussion. We should not forget about the Paris Agreement and the biodiversity discussions, which are now on the top of the agenda. And I would like to wish all the participants a very productive meeting. Please do not hesitate to ask questions. It is really organized as a discussion platform for everyone to speak about industry and business case of circular economy in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much for the introductions. And after this, I suggest that we move on actually to the discussion section and that we start talking about the production approaches in circular economy. It is now my pleasure to pass the floor to the moderator of the first panel discussion, Mr. Andrii Vorfolomeiev, the Director at the Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Center of Ukraine. Right, thank you very much, Katerina. And today we will be kicking off the conference with a panel discussion on circular economy. We'll be talking about some of the components and practices, and we'll be talking both about production approaches, the main tools for engaging with companies, with industries, and we'll also be talking about financial opportunities we'll be talking about the tools and programs available to support these initiatives. And we'll be also talking about some of the incentives available at the national level to support the implementation of circular economy principles. So this is going to be a quite dense discussion. So we will be joined by Johannes Fresner, the technical advisor of UNIDO representing STENUM. We will also be joined by Ivan Omelchuk, the regional coordinator here at the Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Center, Hannes MacNulty, Senior Green Industry Advisor. We will also have representatives of the Ukrainian industry, Myroslava Kalamunyak, representing the Uzhgorod clothing factory, and Mr. Volodymyr Kripkyi from Kyivguma. We will also have an expert, our financial expert, Mr. Serhiy speaking, as well as Ms. Les and Nikolaeva, the international expert from the United Nations Environment Program. So I would like to start with some of the fundamentals of the circular economy, but before this discussion starts, I would like to turn to all of our participants with a suggestion. If you would please drop your questions and comments into the chat. We are quite numerous today. We have 160 participants at the event, which somewhat limits our ability to engage in a dialogue with every single person. So please feel free to formulate your questions and comments into the chat, and I will pass them on to the speakers. If the question is addressed to someone specifically, please make sure to indicate that. You can use any of the languages. We will do our best to understand you. And our speakers will either address the questions to them after their own performances, and we will also have a section for questions and answers at the very end of the panel discussion. So please don't be shy. Right, so starting the panel discussion, we have a wide audience today. So at the very beginning, I would like to lay out sort of the fundamentals. So I would ask Johannes Fresner, our technical advisor for UNIDO, representing STENUM. So could you please dwell a little more on the fundamentals of the circular economy, what it is, what are its key components, and what are the key principles for its implementation? Johannes has a very broad experience engaging with all countries of the Eastern Partnership, as well as others. So Johannes is an incredibly experienced person, and many of his materials are available at the RECP Center's website. We have a lecture by Johannes. It's about 4 hours long. It talks about the circular economy, so please feel free to have a quick look at it. So Johannes, moving to you, I will probably ask you to be much more concise than 4 hours. Let's try and put it into 10 to 15 minutes. So please take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrii, for this introduction. I can assure you I will not take 4 hours, at least not today. Although, as Gregory and Tatiana have addressed already, there would be a lot to discuss. And I'm sure all the participants here, especially the ones representing companies, have had their experiences in closing material cycles, in thinking about new business models. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you also to Gregory and Tatiana for setting the path. You have made quite clear what our topics are. We have together seen in the video actually what are the key elements of the concept we are talking about. I want to connect there. I want to support a few key elements from our observations also. And I want to give a few examples, actually, what we are talking about and what our experiences, especially in Ukraine so far with the concept, and what is the path in the future from here. In a few words only, I'm looking forward to discussion with you. So our topic for now is circular economy concept in Ukraine. What are key elements and what can we say about practices? Now, let us use this model here to describe basically the way we are doing business today. Today's economy is pretty much taking a linear approach. Of course, simplifying now here for this presentation. We are using a linear model of doing business, which starts by extracting material from our mother planet Earth. We process them into products which we distribute, which we use, and which in the end, at least to a big extent, we landfill. This is a not very sustainable model. I think we all agree about that, because we cannot, for the future, continuing extracting more and more materials, in the end landfilling, in the end causing emissions and so on. So these take something, make something, sell it, and in the end dispose it is not really sustainable, but it's describing where we are at the moment. Now, the idea of the new model, how we should do business in the future, was shown very nicely in the video, because the idea actually is to keep the materials in our economic system, to maintain their value, and to explore all the strategies which can help us in doing so. And these strategies are manifold. It starts with a selection of materials, of course, because we should not need hazardous materials. We should use renewable resources in the first place, both as materials and for energy supply. In production now, we should focus. Yeah, let me take a step into the future. We should focus on generating zero waste if possible by optimizing production to turn everything that we receive as a raw material into a useful product to minimize non-product output. And the interesting part, as Gregory has started exploring, is now in the way products are designed, considering the whole life cycle, preparing the ground for business models supporting, basically maintaining the value of materials, keeping them in a long use, and only at the end of their first, second, maybe third life, take the materials they consist of and recycle them or use them to generate energy. Here in this section, we have a variety of strategies which up to now have been explored only to a very limited extent. What are we talking about here? Talking about new business models. We are talking about leasing something, not buying it, but receiving the function, the benefit of having the product rather than buying product. Here is located sharing. You know the concept of car sharing, not owning my personal car, but using it whenever I need it. Here also, to have a longer useful life of products, we have strategies like repairing, maintaining things, refurbishing things. And all these shall help, as Tatiana has expressed very nicely, to maintain the value of materials, to keep materials in the economic cycle as long as possible, and ideally, at least as a vision for the future, not to extract materials from the virgin materials from our planet anymore on the front end, and on the back end of our economy, not to dispose of ideally anything instead of maintaining its value. This in a nutshell now is the idea. And this, to some extent, is a challenge for our creativity. It's also, of course, generating a variety of issues. Andrii has mentioned, for example, financing these new business models. To summarize the idea, and this chart on the right-hand side of the slide represents in a nutshell what we are actually talking about. Circular economy is an alternative of the traditional linear economy. We try in this model to keep resources in use for as long as possible, so that there is maximum value from the use, and we keep materials in the economic cycle, not discard of them. Now, what are their examples? Because this was rather an academic introduction to the concept, I have to admit. Now, what are examples? Let's first discuss just 5-6 examples from UNIDO, so from the global network of resource efficient and cleaner production centers, of which the center in the Ukraine is a member, and there are more than 60 more on this planet. So we are in very good company working on these things. Just some examples without, of course, telling the whole story. One thing I was outlining earlier already is to reduce or minimize the use of hazardous materials. UNIDO has a lot of experience in replacing, for example, PCBs. This picture is from a project in Pakistan. This example comes from one of our participants. If I saw correctly, Serhiy is amongst us. Example is from Belarus. There is in a sweet producing company, there is internal recycling of water containing sugar, basically from cleaning. If we do it properly, we need not discard and treat this wastewater, but can use it. Another example here, this is taking us then to the way forward to the future situation, comes from Vietnam, but it's applicable, and in Eastern European countries, you're very familiar with this, to use heat in an urban setting to heat something the neighbors need in this industrial ecology setting. Why discard of byproducts as waste? Here we have an example from Tunisia, processing green trimmings from the leather industry into soap and gelatin. Another example regarding hazardous materials, recycling of electronic waste in Ethiopia. And one example which very nicely characterizes the idea of a circular economy comes from what is called chemical leasing, and the example here is from Serbia, where companies provide the benefit, for example, of cleaning, lubrication, not by selling chemicals to serve the purpose, but by providing the function and keeping responsibility of the process. So the supplier is in this case not paid anymore to sell you the biggest volume of solvents possible, but he gets paid by the service, which is in this case the number of parts cleaned. This of course provides motivation for the supplier to recover the solvent, to redistill the solvent, to minimize the use of solvent, because this comes at his benefit. So this would be a very good example for such a circular business model. This puzzle here is showing a few examples from the Ukraine. We have seen in the video, and I think Andrii has mentioned it, the Resource Efficient Cleaner Production Center in the Ukraine has worked with almost 200 companies in a variety of projects, supported by the European Commission, but also supported by SECO and by the Swiss Development Cooperation, and by ADA, the Austrian one. And I just took a few examples. We will hear a lot more of such examples than in the following presentations. A few examples, what was done in these projects, and most of this is already preparing the ground for circular economy, or is actually a very good example of circular economy. Example here from a plastics processing company where they optimize the controlling of the injection molding process, but they also recycle internally all the runners and gates, which are a byproduct of this process, such maximizing the use of materials, not discarding of it. We have many examples in all these metal mechanical industries about optimizing compressed air system, changing components, recovering heat, again making the case of recycling, optimizing the capacity, and not to make the long story short. What we see here on the right-hand side is actually recovering byproducts, which is waste, in products like in these ceramic industries, in these brick-making industries. So if we look closely, we find already a lot of options illustrating the logic which we have just briefly discussed, touched, at least on the level of recycling internally, externally, materials and such, maintaining their value. Now, what is the way forward? We will also hear much more about this in the next hours. The cooperation of companies, maximizing the potential impact of industrial symbiosis in eco-industrial park to develop opportunities, how to recycle the waste of one company as a useful replacement for raw materials in another, is underway, and we will hear more of this. Waste mapping serves the same purpose, to visualize what are the wastes in the region originating from businesses, and showing potential paths, what to do with them to maintain their value. We will hear more about sustainable public purchasing, which is moving a lot of financial means and directing it towards sustainably designed products. And we will hear more about eco-innovative business models, really fully harvesting the potential fruits of these ideas of sharing something, delivering the function, not selling a product, renting, leasing, repairing, refurbishing things to give them a long, useful life. I'm coming to my conclusions, and instead of formulating conclusions of my own, I would like to quote a person from the region who has become a close friend over the years, because he put to very simple words actually what are the main principles we are applying. And I think we all agree his statements have a grain of truth in them. Valerie said, there is always room for improvement. I think we can agree. And he says, we just need to take off our sunglasses to look out of the box and stop the routine of accepting waste, to accepting losses. Losses, waste is just an indicator that we have not used our mind to identify appropriate solutions to stop them. He also said something very important, because this characterizes then our working method in UNIDO. It's important to learn fishing instead of serving the fish prepared on a plate. It's more challenging, but it's more lasting. It's more sustainable if we all learn how to fish. And the third one is linking us to economy, to the business perspective of companies. The natural resources which come across the gates of my company in doing a project are assessed by their true value, putting a price tag on them, stopping any careless attitude, because we know now about their value, and contributing to the success of my enterprise at the same time as reducing the environmental impact that results from my enterprise. So, having summarized like this, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to discussion.
Thank you very much, Johannes. So we will be moving on to the questions, as we do have a bit of time available for that. And on my behalf, actually, based on my experience, I wanted to ask you, in Ukraine, when we talk about circular economy, many people tend to focus on waste management. But as I understand, the circular economy is a much wider concept. It is not limited to waste management. What would be your comment on that?
I think you packed the answer, or at least part of the answer I would have given already into your question. Yes, we are talking a lot about recycling, about taking materials, processing them in a way that they can be a substitute for virgin raw materials. But this is not the whole picture. It's not like we're simply continuing our linear model and just collecting the materials at the end and preparing them to as a substitute for raw materials. It's really about I would almost call it a mindset, exploring in a consistent way the whole life cycle of our products, from the perspective of identifying the function, the benefit we actually provide by our products, and then modify accordingly, which can be it will be definitely the selection of materials. If we want a closed cycle, we cannot use toxic materials, hazardous materials, because they would stay with the raw materials. They would make recycling very difficult. We radically have to modify the design of our products, because the idea is to provide a long useful life. The idea to support this also needs to be, how can my product in the future be dismantled? How can it be repaired? What sort of infrastructure is needed? This means then, do I have to team up with an organization that can provide servicing, maintaining, refurbishing of my products? Can I provide this myself? Do I need partners to do that? Ownership of my product becomes an issue. And this is maybe one of the key issues. If I want to support sharing, renting products rather than selling them, I need to finance this. So I need partners who can, let's say, help me to overcome the time between my effort I have to put into my production system and the time when I receive monetary benefit for my products. So lots of things to consider to make it.
I try to move on because we have a lot of speakers too. But two simple questions from my colleagues, I will switch to English just to make it easier to answer, but I know that our translator will make a good job and our participants understand everything. One is it's about, you know, scientific part of RECP and what you can recommend and where you can see this scientific justification of RECP implementation. Just 2 words. For me, it's cleaner production journal, but maybe, you know, something else.
Targeted use of materials, not wasting anything that I can avoid, and to quote Tatiana, maintaining the value and appreciating the value of materials and energy.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on. Thank you, Johannes. Please stay with us because maybe in the end of the presentations we will still have time for questions. I saw one interesting question for you, but maybe it will be in the end.
So we're moving on now, not to lose the dynamics of the discussion. Of course, we can have a very long conversation about circular economy, but let's move on to the national context. The question that was one of the questions directed at us was about the practical visual representation of Ukraine's achievements. So it is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Ivan Omelchuk, the regional coordinator here at the Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Center, who will have about 15 minutes to share the achievements that have been achieved in Ukraine as one of the under the entire concept of circular economy, to share the experiences that we've amassed. Ivan has been working under UNIDO projects implemented jointly with the EU, focusing on resource efficient and cleaner production, and is now actually exporting his knowledge and expertise to Moldova. So let's take it away, Ivan. Yes, thank you very much. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I am very pleasantly surprised by the metaphors that Johannes has used. These are inspirational, I have to say. So I would like to talk about some of the advantages that resource efficient and cleaner production offers to companies in Ukraine. We will talk about some of the experiences and the successes that we have been able to achieve. And I will probably start by talking about the RECP Center in Ukraine, which was established in 2013 as part of the UNIDO project. It was called Supporting the Adaptation and Implementation of Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production through the establishment of the center. And I have to express our gratitude to the project's donors, the governments of Switzerland and Austria, for supporting us, because as it has been mentioned before by the previous speakers, over 180 companies have been able to benefit from our support so far, have been able to use their production resources more efficiently, which means that social conditions have been improved, environmental load has been reduced. But if we're talking about the RECP Center, we're not only engaging with Ukrainian companies, we are now in the process of engaging with Kazakhstan and with companies in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and we are now launching resource efficient and cleaner production clubs into regions of Moldova. So as you might have guessed, we are working not only exclusively with companies and industrial companies, with businesses. We are also engaging with government entities, local governments, with business associations, as well as international organizations and projects. And it is incredibly important and responsible for us that we are the national implementing partner for UNIDO, when it comes to implementing the circular economy and growth opportunities component of the EU for Environment program. I will be speaking today about certain elements of the program, and I will be touching on some of the success stories that we have already seen under the initiative. And I will start by mentioning our model demonstration companies. So this element foresees the expert assessment of businesses, identifying their potentials, developing technical solutions, training, support in developing investment offers for attracting financing. Companies also receive certificates after participation, and we also help them developing business cases. And I'll be talking about this more specifically, and there are pretty interesting indicators available there. I also want to mention that a co-financing scheme is available to the companies, which covers 30,000 hryvnias. 10 companies have participated in this element. Their names are reflected on this slide, and we will actually be joined by a number of representatives from these companies, specifically Kyivguma and the Uzhgorod textile factory, the sewing factory. So we've already visited the companies, we've supported them with developing technical solutions, and I would like to illustrate a few examples. They are represented on this slide. So we might suggest using reverse water supply systems, the installation of heat generators, installing reinforcing bars with heat insulation covers, replacing and cleaning compressor filters. So obviously our experts use specialized equipment to run their analysis. We also run computer models. All of this is done in continuous cooperation and communication with the business representatives in order to make sure that the service is as efficient and useful and practical and actionable as it can be. Then the next element I would like to talk about is the initiative of RECP clubs. So as part of this initiative, clubs have been established in the Poltava and Khmelnytsky oblasts of Ukraine. 8 companies are involved in each. And here's the model of the club. Here's what the idea is about. The club is an association, so to speak, for companies who engage in 6 training modules provided by RECP Center experts. Each of the modules covers a specific topic. We talk about waste management, resource management, energy use, and at the very end, an action plan on resource efficient and cleaner production is compiled for each of the businesses. The businesses are able to make use of a number of tools, and they are also procedurally and technically supported by our RECP Center experts. It needs to be mentioned that we also had to adapt these modules to the online format when the delivery process was taking place. It was happening under COVID conditions amid the pandemic. So we had to adapt the product to the realities of our contemporary online life, so to speak. And here you can see some of the outcomes that we've calculated. So the total number of participants is 16 companies. Their energy saving potential is almost 3,000 megawatt hours per year. The potential reduction of CO2 emissions is around 1,000 tons. Material economy is about 120 tons per year. So the economic impact collectively is about 400,000 euros per year. Now, so if we are talking about the interrelation between projects, the EU for Environment project was preceded by the EAP Green project, which also supported the establishment of RECP clubs in the Kharkiv and Chernihiv oblasts. We also had demonstration campaigns, and it was based on this project that we ran the implementation monitoring, the monitoring of implementation, and we are actually also monitoring the implementation of the EU for Environment RECP club participants, and we're observing initiatives such as installing solar plants, solar panels, modernizing compressed air systems, etc. But returning to the companies that we've been engaged with for many years as part of our projects, we are able to receive comprehensive data from them and speak of success stories. These are represented in so-called business cases that we've compiled, and according to, well, as an outcome of implementing these options, these are the figures that we see. So the number of implemented measures is 41. Energy savings amount to 3,200 megawatt hour per year. The CO2 emission savings amount to 3,500 tons. The reduction of wastewater is 1,700 cubic meters per year. Now, if we talk a little more about the implemented measures, here is the breakdown of what they were aimed at. About 78%, so the vast majority, was focused on reducing energy consumption, then 17% was focused on raw materials and waste. And we can also state that technological measures were implemented and equipment was replaced. That covers 34% of the initiatives. About 27% of the initiatives were focused on process management. The rest of it is represented on the slide, so you can take your time to have a closer look at this slide later. So what are the main outcomes, the main results? On average, the model companies engaged with under EAP Green implemented about 43% of their RECP plans, and this exceeds the average monitoring result at the end of the project, which was about 25–30%, which goes to show that even after the project closed, companies still carry on implementing their identified opportunities. Most of these initiatives are low expense. So, and then about 30% of the savings have been achieved through the implementation of low expense measures with a short return period, which is up to 2 years. The main potential of RECP measures for Ukrainian companies mostly relates to energy savings. Although companies implement new technologies and equipment, their investment levels still remain quite limited. Here are some of the barriers that we have identified. So the limited available funds, financial resources to implement RECP measures, the heightened economic instability in the country, frequent changes of technical staff, limited motivation and tools that would stimulate company staff to implement measures, a lack of highly qualified staff members at companies, and frequent changes in the managerial teams as well as among owners. Now, the next tool that I would like to talk about, it falls under a different project. This is the assessment of industrial parks in terms of their compliance and in terms of their potential to become eco-industrial parks. This was done under the Global Eco-Industrial Parks Program. The assessments are so the industrial parks are assessed against the international framework on eco-industrial parks. We look at their economic, social, environmental performance, as well as the efficiency of their management. We've looked at 3 industrial parks: the Bila Tserkva Cargo Aviation Complex, the Industrial Park Agromash in Zaporizhzhia, and the Industrial Park Patriot in Sumy. So here are some of the figures. The most comprehensive assessment was run at the Bila Tserkva Industrial Park, where we performed RECP assessments of 19 companies. The total number of opportunities and measures implemented are 68, which have contributed to energy savings amounting to 3,000 megawatt hours per year. The CO2 emissions have been cut down by 1,138 tons per year, and wastewater generation has been reduced by 962 cubic meters per year. If we return to the EU for Environment project, we've also run an activity on waste mapping. This was run at 2 territorial communities, the Slavutska and Davydivska communities. So jointly with Sweco, the Swedish company, we have considered the potential for implementing circular economy principles as waste management. This will be covered in more detail a little bit later today. So I'm just flagging this up for you at this point. Also, a separate vein of activity is ensuring information support. You have already had the opportunity to watch the video we presented at the beginning of the event today. You can also use the link on this slide to have a quick gander. The main purpose of this video is to describe such principles and approaches, the principles and approaches of the circular economy in simple words, explaining why it's on the agenda not only for Ukraine, but for the entire world. We are also developing a number of publications and information materials that touch on specific projects such as the EU for Environment Initiative, as well as the other lines of activities implemented by the center. I would also like to dwell separately on the fact that the RECP Center is concentrating a good deal of attention on gender equality, specifically women empowerment in the sphere of resource efficiency and energy in Ukraine. We have developed a number of videos. We have developed publications. We are implementing strategies as regards using our social media resources to focus attention on this aspect as well. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention. I guess this concludes my presentation and my speech. Please feel free to share your questions in the chat or use our moderator as an intermediary. I'll be very happy to address the questions. Yes, thank you very much, Ivan. Yes, I will act as an intermediary either now or at the very end of the discussion. I am sure that we've seen now that the component of circular economy, named resource efficient and cleaner production, is effective and efficient. Ivan has represented figures, and obviously Ivan wasn't able to share the business cases, but they are available on our website, dwelling specifically on some of the companies. So Ivan, I would like to tackle you with a question, with the following question. There are lots of approaches, as you mentioned. We work individually with companies, then we engage at a group level in clubs. We also ensure we support industrial symbiosis at the level of EIPs. There's waste mapping, etc. So Ivan, do you believe that these approaches are combinable, and whether you see any of them having advantages over the others? Yes, obviously, the approaches interrelate and intermingle. This might not be as obvious at first sight, at first glance, but even if we look closer at industrial parks, for example, we can arrive at the conclusion that parks can have resource efficient and cleaner production clubs set up. And actually one of the clubs devoted a good deal of attention to this, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to implement this mechanism there. Each of the tools is quite universal. These tools are mutually integratable, if you don't mind my saying so, and each of them have the potential to address some of the issues that may exist within these structures. They are quite efficient at this. I hope that at the next conference, whenever we have it, we'll be in a position to talk about the success story of establishing a RECP club at one of the parks, and we'll be able to talk about our main achievements. Yes, thank you, Ivan. That's a great idea, because when it comes to industrial parks, they represent a concentration of businesses. And obviously, a RECP club is a very nice tool to engage everyone in the process, to run the assessments, to come up with perspective measures. So this is a very interesting practice. Actually, I think the GIZ implemented the Lead Networks initiative, the Network on Energy Efficiency. So in many ways, this reflects the same principle. When we're talking about group engagements, there's always the issue of scaling initiatives up. If we engaged with each company individually, that would take too much effort. So it makes sense to try and establish clubs and work with companies in groups, make resources available, but shift the responsibility more towards the companies. I understand this is not as tailored an approach, but still, it facilitates engagement with the idea, and it supports the use of internet resources and internet tools. Right, with this, I want to move on to our next speaker, Hannes MacNulty, Senior Green Industry Advisor for the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership. And Hannes will be talking about the iGo tool, which is aimed at globally uncovering the ideas of RECP and the circular economy to companies all over the world. So Johannes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Andrii, and it's definitely a pleasure to be able to take part in this workshop today and to be able to talk about iGo. And I'm very happy that you mentioned right at the end of the last presentation this idea of an RECP club and the ability to scale up by working with groups of companies, because this is a topic I can definitely bring up a little bit in this presentation and explain some ways that we might be able to help facilitate something like that as well. But first, let me introduce myself briefly. So my name is Hannes MacNulty, and I lead the work of the Green Industry Platform, which is one of 3 platforms under a partnership called the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership. And within this Green Industry Platform, we have developed a new initiative called iGo, which is being designed or has been designed to provide tailored resource efficiency knowledge and support services to business. Now, I'm going to explain to you how we do that through the iGo initiative. But what I would like to do first is just give you a very little bit of background to who we are and what we do within the Green Industry Platform, so that you understand better who's behind this iGo initiative. As I mentioned, the Green Industry Platform is one of 3 platforms under this Green Growth Knowledge Partnership. And what our role is to essentially bring green growth related knowledge together in one place and make sure that it is put to good use and promoted to the wider audience. So in a nutshell, the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership helps all the organizations involved in sustainability, green finance, green policy, green industry, get your efforts promoted out there and to reach a wider audience. Now, the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership is supported by the 5 organizations you see down below. And in fact, what's very important to mention is that these 3 platforms also are have access and have developed a community space called the Green Forum. And the reason I want to just spend 1 minute talking about this is because, Andrii, you mentioned the idea of RECP clubs. The Green Forum has been developed for anybody and any project that is interested in having their own private or public community space or discussion group. And it provides a vast array of functionalities to any project out there to have your own community space where you can exchange with each other, where you can share events, you can share documents, you can share knowledge, you can share webinars. It's a very, very strong support, free, of course, it's no charge for anybody out there. We also provide, through the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, the ability for projects to have their own web presence. We offer essentially mini website hosting that builds off our own database and event infrastructure. So we can also provide a web presence for any project that doesn't have it or has a defined lifespan, and they can have this particular web presence hosted by us. So I think these are 2 very important functions to mention that we offer to organizations like participating in today's call. And that is, of course, all in addition to iGo, which I will jump into now in more detail. The Green Industry Platform has the objective to help SMEs become more resource efficient by bringing together all the relevant knowledge and support services in one place and to help them have easy access to this. Now, as a platform, as a global platform, we are obviously very far removed from SMEs. So the question is, how can we bring the work we do to the SME so that they can make use of the knowledge and support services we bring together? And that is why we came up with the idea of IGO. IGO for us is a way to bring our work in a tailored fashion to a particular SME. It's a way to help us connect with large numbers of SMEs and support them according to their own individual specific needs. Now, what I want you perhaps to see IGO as is a support structure. It's a support structure for helping SME supporting organizations as well as SMEs. So any organization out there that provides, let's say, a technical guide to training, to financial assistance, to SMEs, we want to understand who's doing what, get it all kind of, let's say, put in one place and organized, and then help those organizations get their specific support services to individual SMEs based on the needs of SMEs. So our support structure is to make sense of what's out there, to understand the needs of SMEs, to understand what's available, and to match the two together. So how does this actually work? Well, let me explain exactly how this works in terms of IGO. The first thing we do is, quite importantly, is bring information together. Country by country, we go research in terms of what's available for SMEs in relation to resource efficient guidance, tools, but also training, technical assistance, and financing solutions. And we put that in a database where everything is organized by topic: energy, water, waste, materials. And our database brings all of this information together in one place that you can search by topic, but also by country, also by sector of activity. It's a database and it brings it all together. And that is, you could say, the foundation of IGO, is bringing this information together. But of course, as I mentioned, this is honestly probably useless if we don't have a way to help SMEs understand which of this information is relevant to them and what will help them the most. And for this, we have developed a self-assessment tool. And now this is not an in-depth diagnostic tool. It's a self-assessment tool to help an SME understand roughly what their resource efficiency status is. Are they just starting out? Are they wanting to improve? Or are they quite advanced? And with an understanding of an SME's resource efficiency status, knowing where they're located, what their sector of activity is, what size they are, we can then go into our support center, or SME support center, and pull out the most relevant guidance and support service for that particular SME. And what that does is, by doing this simple assessment, an SME gets an idea of what their resource efficiency status is, and they get specific recommendations that direct them, one, to the most relevant technical guide or tool or financial solution, as well as some very simple guidance on what are the best steps to take. So the idea is, this self-assessment tool enables an SME to access what they most need based on their specific needs. Now, what we also have, and I have to admit it's more developing in development stage next year, is an implementation manager tool. And what this is going to be is a way for an SME who is embarking on a resource efficiency project to track their related data. So if they have an energy audit, they can put that data into the implementation manager tool, and they can get a cost benefit analysis carried out. They can benchmark the measures identified with, let's say, the results that other SMEs have had. They can track their performance data before and after the measure is implemented. And of course, they then have a way to report on the performance of the implemented measures to either their client, a bank, for regulation, for a label, for certification. It's a way of tracking the data and making sure their performance is presented in a good way. Now, all of this is no good without actually a way to reach these SMEs. And that's why another core element of the IGO initiative is our IGO network. And this is where country by country, we develop a network with organizations that provide support services, for example, like the Ukrainian Cleaner Production Center or other cleaner production centers, or government agencies or NGOs, or the EU projects or the UN projects. Whoever is providing support services, we'd like to partner with them, one, to promote what they're doing, but also as a way to bring other supports to the SMEs they work with. And of course, another important type of IGO network member are the business associations, because they have access to a lot of SMEs, but also large companies that have supply chains that are made up of SMEs. So for us, this development of a network is really, really important for these tools, this database, this self-assessment to actually be put to use. We are not in a position to engage directly with SMEs, but the IGO network members are. And that's why we developed this very, very important collaboration. Now, what are the benefits for somebody getting involved in our IGO network? Well, I suppose the first thing to mention is through our global platform and all of the different organizations that support us, we're in a very good position to help you as an organization get your, let's say, the work you're doing better promoted, and obviously reach more SMEs, and to help you engage with a much larger group of peer organizations that are doing similar things to you. So really, on a basic level, we promote the work you're doing, and we support your engagement between you and other organizations, but also with potential project funders. So really see the general IGO initiative as a very basic but very effective way to upscale the work you're doing, make more people aware of it, achieve or get involved in collaboration opportunities, and also get the attention of donors. But then, of course, a very important aspect of IGO is that we get a lot of feedback. Through the self-assessment tool, because we understand, we get information on the needs of SMEs through this resource efficiency status, we can go back to organizations that are part of the network and explain to them and what a specific need is. If their support service doesn't quite meet that need, how it could be adapted, or because we know who else is doing what, we could say, maybe you can take this particular tool and translate it to meet this specific need. What it comes down to is that we provide a real connection of the dots. We integrate, we understand who's doing what in terms of support services, in terms of knowledge products, financing. We understand the needs of the SMEs, and we can match all of this up together and really create also this very important feedback loop that will help us all improve the services and scale up what we're delivering to SMEs. Now, we are currently testing out the IGO initiative in terms of collecting the information to build up our SME support center, and also to develop this IGO network that I mentioned. And we are doing this in your region, in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, but also Africa and Latin America. And this is a pilot that is currently underway, will be running until spring of next year. And for example, in the Eastern Europe, Central Asia region, and in particular in the Ukraine, if you have any interest to be involved in the IGO solution, please do contact Andrii's team, because they are actually our implementing partner in the region and helping us pilot the IGO initiative within three target countries: the Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, but also building awareness within the region for the project as well. So I would really invite you, if you're of interest, to definitely touch base with Andrii on the IGO initiative. So just as a quick summary, see IGO as a way of connecting the dots, as a way to help you with your organization, have a greater impact to upscale the results. And just to mention as a last point, RECP clubs are something we would love to facilitate and support overall in the region. Andrii, back to you.
Дякую, Ханнесе. Хотів би також у вас
Yes, thank you very much, Johannes. I wanted to hit you with a question. When will you be launching the platform? At what point will it be available to the companies? And what should stakeholders and anyone interested do until the platform is available?
Okay, so let's talk about the IGO self-assessment tool, which is probably the most interesting for the SMEs, because this is the direct interaction. The IGO self-assessment tool, we intend to launch, if we just take the region, the Eastern Europe region, this will be launched roughly about March of next year. And why I say roughly is because we are in the process of translating this tool and adding all the different support services, etc., to it to be relevant for the region. And we are targeting a launch workshop about the end of February, which will mean this tool will be available in March. In the meantime, anybody who is interested to be involved in the IGO initiative, to have their support services or knowledge products included in our database, but also then included in the self-assessment tool, I would really invite you to connect with the Ukrainian Cleaner Production Center, to share your resources with them, because they are our implementing partner and will make sure that is included in the self-assessment tool. On a very simple basis, that's your answer, Andrii, I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Johannes. And I can reconfirm on my behalf, I want to push you and inspire you. If you have materials available, I know we're joined by representatives of the academia today. If you are aware of materials that can be useful and relevant for companies here in Ukraine, well, please feel free to share them with us. We will be also compiling a library of materials to be used by MSPs here in the country. So I'm sure this will support scaling up your activities and making more people aware of what you do. Right, this is not a question. Now we will be moving on to representatives of businesses, and I'm delighted that we're joined today by Myroslava Kalamunyak, the owner and director of the Uzhgorod clothing factory. So Myroslava, moving on to you, I would like to hear from you. What have been your impressions from implementing RECP ideas under the EU for Environment initiative? So let's start with Das. How has been your experience, and do you see any tangible advantages? Yes, greetings, colleagues. Thank you very much for inviting me to today's event, for inviting me to this incredibly important initiative. So, as we are all aware, we are developing our businesses based on mostly our own ideas and beliefs. And it was my belief that clothing production, what my factory is engaged with, is in no way harmful for the environment. You know, it's whoever is engaged in metal production or burning coal, it's them who harm the environment. But as more and more information became available on the true condition of things, on the true picture, I actually felt angry. If my company is hurting the environment so much, if clothing hits the environment so much by being excessive, by engaging in fast fashion, I realized this will mean that my incomes will be hit. I will be making less of a profit. My products will not be demanded, and this pushed me towards changing my beliefs and convictions. And in one way, the stimulus towards changing was also the act of signing the agreement with the organization, the Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Center in Ukraine. We were approached by experts. They arrived here at our production site. And, you know, in some way, for them, things were much more obvious than to us. We were enclosed, thinking in the box, so to speak. We always tended to thought that we're very efficient when it comes to resource consumption, energy consumption, gas consumption. We do sort our waste, etc. But they were able to bring in an independent perspective, and they saw lots of potentials, a lot of potential for improvement, for which I am incredibly grateful. With the support of the experts, we were able to compile an action plan. Some of the initiatives were put into action immediately because they did not require a great deal of expenses. We were able to regulate our boiler, for example, to consume less compressed air. Some of the initiatives require more expenses and more time, but we are moving ahead with the action plan, and we understand how important it is. Apart from this, I think a great change was that we are now thinking differently about what we do. What we deal in is fashion, and clothes can serve you for many years, but people want new ones because, you know, they strive for change. But now it's fashionable to be energy efficient. It's fashionable to take care of the environment. And if you consider our product in terms of the trend towards being environmentally friendly, towards being environmentally clean, you can find a lot of positive ideas in this new approach. Our clothes will become better due to this higher level of attention. We now think of what we use. We look for producers and providers. We try to use more natural textiles. And for example, we are now using not only cotton, but also other natural types of fiber, which replace non-disposable materials. We've also started thinking about using our waste more efficiently, and we arrived at the idea that we can use our scraps to produce doll clothing. So instead of paying for disposal, we are actually turning this into a source of profit. So overall, our design department has been able to change their vision. And what we are offering now is a different breed of clothing, a more universal, more classic kind of clothing. And annually, we try to think on what we can add and what we can change to make our products look fresher. Perhaps we can spice them up with elements. So comprehensively, this has become a very strong push for us to change our entire philosophy. I am in touch with colleagues, and I am sharing some of the fresh approaches that I've been able to implement here in Uzhgorod and Transcarpathia. We have other clothing manufacturers, and we are planning to join our efforts to chip in with our funds to hire an expert that would be super engaged with environmental protection, supporting us all in implementing these environmental protection initiatives. We understand this will require a certain amount of funds, but if we share this among 5 different enterprises, this will be easier for us all to have an in-staff person to continuously monitor our environmental performance and suggest initiatives for improvement. So briefly, this is how we see our contribution to the environment. This is how we see our work in the future. It's important that the germ of the idea is now developing. We are implementing lean production, the ideas of lean production, which also cover a good deal of environmental issues. So, and this is not only an issue that management is solely interested in. Each of our employees also engage with the topic, and they all share their ideas with us, suggesting ways of cutting out unnecessary waste, replacing plastic cups with paper cups, etc. So a lot is being done currently, and we are considering a lot of initiatives. This all goes to show that when we come together, when we combine our efforts towards properly improving our manufacturing capacities, I'm sure we will in no way lose any income. We will actually be making a step forward towards becoming better companies, towards offering more high quality products, and towards ensuring a higher quality environment for ourselves and for the generations to come. We have been lucky. What we received was a clean environment from our ancestors, but what we've done to this environment is something that we should definitely consider. Right, thank you very much. I mentioned that Johannes has had a 4-hour lecture. I'm sure I could have a 4-hour conversation with you. Thank you for all of the bullet points that you've raised. So Hannes MacNulty, the previous speaker, mentioned that there would be a platform helping companies find sectorally relevant solutions for themselves, service providers that would be relevant for them. And I wanted to ask you, so this platform, as Hannes mentioned, is going to be launched in March, but it's going to be available in Russian to cover the entire region of Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan. Do you think this is going to be a huge issue for Ukrainian companies if the questions and the information is shared in Russian, or should we make one more step to make sure that it's entirely Ukrainianized, like Netflix did? What's your opinion? Well, we are people of honor, so to speak, and of course we would prefer to receive information in Ukrainian, but I'm sure this is not going to be a game changer, a game breaker, sorry. The younger generation might be a little more proficient in English, so they'll be referring to that. We can still speak Russian, so we're gonna make do. It's important to have these initiatives. Information support is a great thing. I remember the RECP Center actually developed a questionnaire, if I'm not mistaken. It was just last week that we underwent a very interesting testing initiative. It was a great sort of self-consideration questionnaire, which was compiled in a very interesting way, where you had to come up with this checking whether we are participating in the movement. Yes, this is a bit of a different topic. Yes, we are trying to translate everything in Ukrainian for the Ukrainian audience, and this is a questionnaire under a different component, the Sustainable Procurement Initiative, and we'll be talking about that just a little bit later. Please stay with us, Myroslava, and we will definitely have more questions to you. The same amount of questions, actually. I want to direct them towards Mr. Volodymyr Kripkyi, who is representing the Kyivguma company. He's the Director for Production Development and Innovation. So Volodymyr, what has been your experience and what have been your impressions? Yes, so greetings to everyone here. It is a huge pleasure to be joining this highly useful virtual conference. My impressions, both from the conference and basically from our engagement with the RECP Center, are exclusively positive. I will just briefly introduce the company. We've been in operation for more than 90 years, and over the 90 years, we have been focused on producing various leather and leather-related products. We work with polyethylene, polypropylene. That overall, the list of raw materials that we use is over 150 points long. About 80% of these raw materials are sourced from abroad. Unfortunately, our potential is quite limited when sourcing materials from Ukraine, and we produce hundreds of various outputs. I'm sure that you use what we produce, starting with table covers, hot water bottles. We produce lots of medical items. We produce containers for various medical products. Also, we produce hoses, connectors, etc., used in industrial at industrial companies. And as you can imagine, we use several dozens of very different kinds of production lines, various types of equipment. All of these items consume various quantities of resources and energy. So since the very first day of our existence, we have been pressed towards considering efficiency, energy efficiency, material resource efficiency, and we have always been aware of the waste that is generated by our production lines. And if we lose focus on these issues, we will obviously in some 3 to 6 months will end up with a huge pile of waste needing attention. So it was many years ago, actually, that we've set the goal for ourselves when certain companies, certain processing companies, actually, recycling companies started closing down in Ukraine. We faced the issue of finding companies who would be able to make productive use of our byproducts and our wastes, but we've been able to come up with, to find partners like that, and about 100% of our byproducts are used by other companies. The reason why we cannot deal with our waste is because 70% of the outputs that we manufacture are medical products, which and state standards stipulate that secondary materials cannot be used for medical products. Returning to the topic of engaging with the RECP Center, we've started our collaboration this year and we are very satisfied. We are impressed, may I say, by the professional approach of our RECP Center colleagues. I will probably agree with Myroslava. Our eyes have been opened wide. We have been we have appreciated some of the aspects of our production more. In 2013, we moved outside the city of Kyiv. We moved into the suburbs, and we were able to implement absolutely new technologies in terms of using energy resources, using industrial fumes, for example. We believed that we had already achieved a good level of efficiency, but our RECP Center colleagues, after looking at all of the nooks and crannies of our manufacturing side, have been able to come up with a dozen of various suggestions. Very practical, very actionable, and it was this year that we've started implementing some of these initiatives. We're not talking about millions of savings, but we're also not having a conversation about millions of resources required in terms of investment. So we are expecting more suggestions as to training for our staff, and I can corroborate, I can say that these are efficient approaches. Training events are something that is incredibly useful, especially when they're delivered by someone highly professional. When the trainers use practical examples, when they're able to explain the initiatives and the ideas in simple terms, when they're able to demonstrate actual outcomes and positive improvements for the owners. Yes, Volodymyr, I have to agree with you. Just as Myroslava pointed out, it's important that everyone gets involved, not only the management, but also the rank and file staff members. And we will definitely be delivering training to you. As Ivan mentioned, this is part of the package that we can provide to a model company under the EU for Environment Action. A brief question to you. What's your evaluation? So among the measures that we have suggested for you, what do you think you will need? What are your limitations right now in order to be able to put them in place? Well, to be honest with you, the suggestions that you came up with They are so well defined. They are so well elaborated. The only thing we really need is time. They're not expensive, so we will not probably be even looking for co-financing options. All of these initiatives can be covered by our own credit lines with the banks that we've established collaboration with. So we might have a shortage of working hands, so to speak, to put it all in place in a couple of months. But if you give us 6 to 8 months with a few modifications, with a few simplifications, we'll be able to put all of the initiatives in practice. Right. Thank you very much for your answer. And it's great to see that you're ready to engage and you have the resources, because when we engage with companies, we often hear that they're limited in financial resources and financial opportunities. And for companies like this, we have invited Mr. Serhiy Porovsky, who is the financing expert at the UNIDO GEF project, IEE Introduction of Energy Management System Standards in the Ukrainian Industry. So, Serhiy, let's have you talking about some of the financial options available to companies also under your projects. Yes, thank you very much, Andrii. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It was very pleasant to hear what company representatives have to say. I was quite impressed by what Myroslava Kalamunyak had to say. And I will be talking not only the fund that we've established, the loan guaranteeing fund, I will also be covering some of the other initiatives that we've launched. And I'm sure that Myroslava needs to be aware to be able to use some of our opportunities, perhaps fill in a couple of forms to receive a prize for her achievements and for the work that she's put in place. I would like to mention that the Resource Efficiency Center was also established with support from UNIDO, and I am very happy that Andrii is managing this center, and the center is supporting companies in our region, in Ukraine and beyond. So UNIDO has a number of key areas that it engages with. These are energy efficiency, resource efficiency, and modern technology implementation. And I am focused on energy efficiency specifically. And if we look at the entire chain of what companies need to do in order to ensure their competitiveness, in order to stay abreast with the times, so to speak. Right, so understanding the issue that we are dealing with here today, the Ukrainian economy is very energy efficient. It is one of the most energy intensive industries in Europe, for example. So energy is not being used efficiently, which hampers its competitiveness. And then the final bullet point here, the circular or cluster approach to using resources is quite limited, which impacts the environment negatively. The inefficient use of energy resources leads to the carbonization of the economy. The amount of CO2 emitted increases, and this is an indicator not of this resources sufficient offering, but rather its inefficient use. So reducing the energy intensity of our economy, of the Ukrainian economy, is not only an issue of its proper development, but also is linked to the issue of safety and reliability. So over the 10 years, the UNIDO Industrial Energy Efficiency Program has achieved a lot, and I would like to focus your attention on a few of the figures indicated here. During its first year, and in this context, it's great to hear from the industrial companies present here today. We are achieving significant resource consumption reductions after the measures suggested by the experts are implemented all over the world. Within the first year, the companies that UNIDO engaged with under its energy efficiency program, they usually are able to achieve about 4 to 15% of savings when it comes to energy. Also, these reductions, if we turn them into the financial equivalent, they achieve reach up to 400 million US dollars. And we've been able to save more than 10 million tons of CO2 emissions. So here's the chain reaction. Its result should be an improvement in energy management, energy efficiency for companies. I'm sure you're well aware of this, but the main provision, the essence of energy efficiency is that you compare your indicators to your own production outputs. So the reduction of energy consumption should not impact the volume of production. It means that you produce the same amount of outputs, but you consume fewer resources. But in order for this to be achieved, in order to reduce your energy resource consumption and any resource consumption to reduce your CO2 emissions, you need to put a lot in place. You need to have policies, you need to have primary legislation put in place at the national level. You need to implement the ISO 15001 standard, you need to put infrastructure in place, and you need to come up with relevant financial services, which is why we have been very active and we have implemented the loan guarantee fund for industrial enterprises along with Ukrgazbank. The link is here to receive a loan. You need to approach Ukrgazbank. The conditions, I will talk about them a little later. We've also implemented a support program for loan takers as part of this initiative. This whole system is in place. We've already had companies making use of this tool, and they're very, very satisfied. And it was just very recently that we've launched the award Leaders of Energy Management, where companies will receive an incentive. We're talking about money that the companies will be receiving. And in order to succeed, they need to apply, they need to fill in a number of documents, but most importantly, you need to contribute to awareness raising among other businesses, sharing your own experience. And it's also important that the company understand the main issues in energy efficiency and the main ways of tackling them. So this national award, Leaders in Energy Management, has two main tracks, one for SMEs and one for large companies. It is administered by the Ukrainian-European Joint Energy Agency, and you can follow the link to check out all the information on the selection criteria, the rounds of selections. We also have instructions on filling in the application package. And I want to point out this has been put in place for Ukraine specifically. There is also a global analog, the Energy Ministerial, and we've had one of the Ukrainian companies applying for the global award as well. And this is now available here in Ukraine. All of these tools are working. So I am hoping that apart from the award, this will be a positive experience for Ukrainian companies. Moving back to the issue of financial provisions, I'm a person with 15 years of experience in investing, and I want to say that any sort of good idea usually needs to be supported financially, otherwise it just won't fly. And it was my task under this project to come up with a financial tool that would make use of guarantees. So we provide guarantees to Ukrgazbank, and Ukrgazbank will be able to provide you as the loan taker with conditions that it would not provide unless it received the guarantee from us. So the main advantage of this financial mechanism is that you end up with a reduced interest rate. I've highlighted it in red because it might be a little lower nowadays, actually. This might be outdated information, but to find out what the interest rate is, you need to get in touch with Ukrbagazbank, but definitely the interest rate is not higher than the figures you see here. You will not have to present collateral. You will not have to come up with any sort of collateral, so be it either equity or assets. This is all covered by our guarantee that we provide to Ukrgazbank. Now, the only thing that we want to turn your attention to is that these loans first of all, will be provided to support the implementation of energy management systems. Examples that Myroslava talked about: when experts arrive and they open your eyes to certain aspects of production that you should be aware of, but for some reason you are not entirely aware of. So implementing energy management systems which support this sort of change is the main target initiative that we want to support and that we see as one of the key prerequisites for serious change and improvement at industrial companies. And I will bring up a couple of examples of how this has led to fantastic outcomes. So the financial sector has become aware of how beneficial energy management systems have become. The market for energy efficiency and resource efficiency is developing actively. And with support from an energy management system, you can come up with much better initiatives. Serhiy, just on my behalf, I would like to ask you perhaps to move on to some of the conclusions, because our next speaker will have to be limited to like 5 minutes. So let's just come to a conclusion and the main bullet points. Right. So speaking about the overall amount of the credit, of the loan, there is a more detailed presentation by Ukrgazbank available. So what does the support cover? Basically, there are three main components. First, the management of the company needs to demonstrate a high level of interest towards change. Then professional experts and consultants need to be involved. Our website presents a list of accredited, trained experts who have participated in our training events, so are in a good position to support you. And then the outcomes that you will receive the reduction of in energy consumption, integration of energy management in your business processes, improvement of production practices, an increase in efficiency resulting from the implementation of energy-saving technologies, better communication with financial institutions if you wish to further receive financial support, and an overall growth in your brand value. So speaking about examples, a couple of examples, we've implemented the energy management system at a food manufacturing company here in Ukraine. The total cost was 4.7 million. Sorry, the total cost of implementing the energy management system was 1 million hryvnias, and the ROI factor, ROI, was 250%. As you can see, the project returned its investment in 0.4 years. Thank you very much, Serhiy. There's a behind-the-scenes battle for time, actually, initiating. So we will have to conclude your presentation with this. We will share the links to all of the resources in the chat. Let's share the link to the award, and we will also be supporting you in promoting this whole award system. I'm sure our companies are going to be very much interested in this. As you can see, there's been a deluge of questions for you in the chat, so we will have a separate discussion with you. Let's share this. Right, lots of topics to cover. We still have one more speaker in this panel, so I will have to ask the organizers to lend 10 minutes to us. We've talked about the topic of financing, but there are also other tools for companies we shouldn't forget about the government's impact on this whole process. So I would like to invite Lesia Nikolaeva now to speak, who is the international expert at the United Nations Environment Program, who will talk about sustainable procurement, which our companies here should participate in. I'm sure we'll have at least 7 minutes. Yes, thank you very much, Andrii. Greetings, colleagues. For you, this is a huge honor to be speaking to you here at this conference. It's been incredibly interesting so far. And what I love is that we're getting to hear from business representatives. This is incredibly important because both the non-government sector, the government sector, the international community get more opportunities to engage among themselves. But when we're joined by business representatives, this goes to show how interested they are, how involved they are, which is of course great. So I would like to briefly represent the UNEP's support to sustainable procurement in Ukraine. And first of all, let's have a few words on when UNEP engaged with this topic originally. We started working with sustainable procurement in 2012, 2013, when UNEP developed the methodology for promoting and presenting sustainable public procurements at the national level. And this map highlights at the global level which companies and under which projects UNEP provided this sort of support to. So this year, we've published the second edition of UNEP's guidelines on sustainable public procurement, and we've shared the link that you can follow to download this, this guide. So specifically talking about the pan-European region, we know that the tool of sustainable public procurement, as it has been mentioned today, it is one of the effective, efficient tools supporting the transfer towards sustainable production and sustainable consumption, so supporting the transfer towards green economy models. This tool is actively used in European Union countries, and these non-cost, non-price criteria and sustainability criteria used to be sort of non-mandatory for the organizations running procurement processes. Now the conversation is shifting towards actually using these sustainability criteria as mandatory ones in the European Union, and relevant changes are on the horizon as regards policy documents. If we consider Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia countries, Ukraine has made huge strides actually and achieved a huge amount of progress as compared to other countries. Ukraine is now very actively moving in the right direction. I want to stress that sustainable public procurement and which means the use of state budget funds to cover the needs of state institutions, the army, the armed forces, social infrastructure subjects, has a huge, can produce a huge economic impact, covering 15% of Ukrainian GDP. If we're talking about OECD countries, this amounts to about 10 to 30% of their GDP. Some countries, in some countries, public procurement amounts to about 30% of the volume of their GDP. So UNEP has started supporting Ukraine through the EAP Green program, which was funded by the European Union and covered the years 2013, 2018, and a consortium of different international organizations were involved, such as UNEP, the OECD, UNIDO, and with support from our national experts, they remain unchanged. This is the NGO, the all-Ukrainian NGO, the Living Planet in Ukraine. Obviously, the spectrum of our contracts and the organizations that we engage with in Ukraine is growing, is enlarging, but the Living Planet has been a steady partner and reliable partner for us. And within this project, we've been able to make some of the first steps in line with the UNEP methodology. We've run an assessment of the current situation. We've performed the legal expertise. We've identified 3 priority groups of products, developed criteria for them, developed guidelines in working with them. We also developed the communication strategy for SPPs, and throughout the years that the project was implemented, we also, of course, ran training events, and we developed a number of tools. We've also supported a number of measures on eco-labeling, as well as awareness-raising events. Further, support was provided as part of the new program, the EU for Environment Action, within which we are meeting today. It is also funded by the European Union. And currently, we, well, over the previous year, we can boast of a number of achievements, and we are planning to continue our activities over the next 2 years in Ukraine. Speaking about our achievements, we have run an assessment of progress on SPP and on eco-labeling in Ukraine. Over covering the years between the projects, between 2017 and 2021. We have also identified the priorities and the market's level of readiness on 2 groups of products. We've also developed criteria, sustainable procurement criteria for these products. There are plans on improving the Prozoro online procurement platform, introducing new fields to be automatically filled in, which will allow for the monitoring of SPPs and to become more aware as to how actively non-price criteria and sustainable procurement criteria are used by state organizations. We will also run training events. We will raise the professionalism of experts, and we also plan to run more large-scale pilot tenders. We have already run awareness-raising events, and I'm sure that many of you have participated. And we have also developed a very simple video, which is subtitled in Ukrainian. Here is the link that you can use, and we also are calling on you to use this video, share it with your colleagues, present it at your events whenever you need to explain in simple words what sustainable public procurement is. There is also another project that was implemented in Central Asia and also covered Ukraine, was the United Nations Development Account, which is coming to a close this month. It covered a period of 3 years, and we've been able to generate rather interesting outputs in Central Asia. As concerns Ukraine, it was in partnership with the RECP Center and the Green Growth Knowledge Partnership. We provide technical support to companies. We've had a seminar, a workshop on the 30th of November in 2021, and expert and advisory support is going to be provided to 20 companies in order to assess their level of readiness, their preparedness for participating in sustainable procurement tenders. Our local partners will also develop recommendations for these companies in terms of improving their sustainability status. We have also organized a number of awareness-raising events. Mostly these were regional workshops, And another thing I want to present to you is a number of useful links to resources developed by us. These are documents drafted by UNEP, and we will be very happy to address any questions you might have. And since the project and since this component on sustainable public procurement will carry on for another 2 years, we are very closely following, very closely listening to your needs. We want to find out what various stakeholders in Ukraine are interested in to make sure that we use our opportunities and our financial resources as efficiently as possible to promote the idea of sustainable public procurement and eco-labeling. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lesa, and you have touched upon the events, some of the initiatives that we're engaging in with the Uzhgorod clothing factory. Yes, we are running assessments there. So obviously, we will share all of the materials after the event, so you will have access to all of these links. Lesa, if you take 1 minute to answer this question, UNEP has been working with SPPs in Ukraine since 2013. So have you felt a change, a shift in attitude from Ukrainian businesses and the Ukrainian governmental sector? Thank you very much for the question. I would say the change has been obvious. I have to say that Ukraine is now at a different level. Ukraine, in terms of these issues, is a regional leader, regional pioneer, both due to international support and to its domestic internal understanding on behalf of the ministries, of the companies. They are all aware of the need for change and sustainable public procurement. And they are aware that sustainable public procurement is a stepping stone towards positive change. When we started working in 2014, when UNEP was engaging with this topic in Ukraine, back then we were only able to engage with the Ministry of Environment. And now we are proud to state that we're also closely engaged with the Ministry of Economy, the relevant department that is responsible for promoting sustainable public procurement. It is also incredibly important that the relevant law on procurement stipulates that non-cost, non-price criteria can be used when running procurement procedures. And I feel that the overall level of awareness among government agencies, among NGOs, among ministries is much higher than what we were dealing with when we started our activity. And here I have to express my gratitude to all of the other international organizations who've supported us, the GIZ, the Slovak Development Agency, the World Bank, as well as other international agents and donors. Thank you. Thank you, Lesa. I guess that concludes the first panel discussion. I want to thank all of the speakers who have joined us here today, who have delivered incredibly interesting presentations, which were very difficult to interrupt and stop. And we've taken a little more time than we were supposed to. This has been incredibly interesting. I'm afraid we are pressed for time, so we will not be able to address questions immediately, but feel free to still formulate them in the chat, and I will make sure that we reach out to you later. With this, I want to pass the floor back to Katerina. Katerina, please go ahead. Yes, thank you very much, Andrii. Thank you to all of the participants for a very lively discussion. And now I suggest that we quickly spend the break, and I want to invite you to listen to the presentation of lean production, the lean production product, which is implemented by USAID, which is going to be presented by Volodymyr Popovich. Please, Volodymyr, take it away. Yes, thank you very much, Katerina, for the introduction. So let me know if you can see my presentation. Yes, if you could switch into full screen mode. Yeah, thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. It is a huge pleasure to be joining you here at this event and to be presenting this rather specialized, a unique training program, which is implemented as part of the On Lean Furniture initiative, raising MSP's capacity as to implementing lean production in the furniture sector. It is supported by USAID's program, USAID Competitive Economy Program for Ukraine. So what is lean? So the author of the lean production term is the Japanese engineer working for Toyota. Taiichi Ono is the author, and some of the first attempts of optimizing manufacturing derived from the 1950s. And briefly speaking, lean production is about methods of organizing production that are that have been crystallized as part of Toyota's practice, but then they have been adapted towards being implemented in any sector. And now lean production is implemented by world-renowned furniture manufacturers such as IKEA, JYSK, and others represented on this website. The lean system suggests a set of methods and tools implementing which allows to increase the efficiency of furniture production and eliminate non-productive losses. Our course, the course that is currently actively being developed, it aims at increasing the efficiency of using all resources at furniture manufacturing companies. So we focus on design, production. We're talking about wood materials, metal materials, water, compressed air, packaging, etc. Lean can help increase your production efficiency by some 10 to 15% or reduce waste by some 20%. We also focus on improving the efficiency of managing furniture production, and this can also lead to significant improvements in production. We also focus on raising labor efficiency, labor productiveness, which also means tackling HR revolving door practices, so to speak. And we're also focusing on another important component for furniture companies. We focus on increasing the added value of their products and thus contributing to their improved competitiveness. Now, the target audience for the course covers representatives of furniture companies, large and medium-sized. We can be talking about owners, managers, sustainable development managers, if they have such a position, also production managers, engineers, energy experts. We also have an indirectly involved audience. We also always invite students of relevant educational programs, as well as independent consultants and experts on lean production. We also identify a list of beneficiaries, which covers governmental institutions, regional administrations, local governments, local communities. We also see as beneficiaries the sectoral furniture manufacturing associations, which do exist in Ukraine, as well as business support organizations. Of course, similar grant projects for furniture companies can be seen as beneficiaries, as well as educational institutions. And I want to stress that this educational course is developed in collaboration with the Kyiv Polytechnic Institute. So in the future, we have plans as to integrating this training program into the curriculum of the Polytechnic Institute. So obviously, we will be discussing the option of integrating this training program into the curricula of other educational institutions, for example, the National Forestry Industry Institute. And we are currently in negotiations with the well-known Ukrainian educational platform, Prometheus, and as we are going to pilot the course, we plan to allow 150 participants to have free of charge access. And after we finish the pilot launch, we plan to commercialize the course. Now, briefly, I want to speak about the course format. It covers 4 to 5 hours of video lectures, and currently we are actively developing the course. As I mentioned before, each model will include a presentation, a theoretical and practical section. It will focus on positive case studies, which will illustrate positive practices of implementing lean production. And obviously, to support better take-in of the material, we will also have practical exercises. We will ask our participants to come up with suggestions for implementing lean practices. And obviously, each of the participants will be able to engage in private consultations as well as group consultations with our mentors. The participants that will cover more than 75% of the course material and will successfully pass the test will receive an electronic certificate. So the registration for course is open now, so anyone willing can register. The registration will run all the way through the 1st of March 2022. The pilot free of charge courses will include 150 participants representing furniture companies. We will take into account the difference between companies who make bespoke furniture and produce standardized furniture items serially. We will also take into account the regional representation. Our RECP Center has a number of regional representations, and so we engage with companies all over the country, which will allow each of the regional coordinators to select 30 to 40 participants from their relevant regions. So if you want to register, you can actually use the QR code on your screen right now to access the Google form and register for our online course. You will need to fill in the Google form, share some information on you for us to be able to properly select the participants. And of course, you will be receiving my presentation after today's event. So don't worry, the QR code will be available to you. And this final slide represents our contacts as well as the USAID program's contact info. So please feel free to like and subscribe our pages. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope all of our participants have used this opportunity to take a bit of a break. And now we are moving to the discussion on waste management, benefits and opportunities. And it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator of this discussion, National Action Coordinator at the EU for Environment Action, Ms. Lena Vaslyukivska. Please go ahead, take it away. Yes, thank you very much, Katerina. Greetings, everyone. I have been impressed by the efficiency of the organizers who have used the tiny little break to present useful and practical information. This event is unique, and as the moderator, to set up the context of our discussion, I want to voice 3 main ideas. My first idea is going to be illustrated by this slide, where at the very beginning of the discussion, Andrii asked, what is the difference? Well, he actually asked whether circular economy is just about waste management and what's the difference between circular economy and waste management. And I love this slide, which I borrowed from the European Environment Agency. It shows the focus of 2 important concepts that we're working with, the green economy and the circular economy. So the circular economy covers waste management as well. And this section we are having today, the discussion we're having today, is the necessary prerequisite for the circular economy. We need to make sure that waste management is efficient. This also covers waste generation prevention and energy efficiency. And obviously, the circular economy is an important core to transform national economies and the global economy into a green entity where we will be taking care both of the welfare of our people and of the sustainability of the ecosystem. My next idea is to do with the fact that currently Ukraine is seeing a good deal of waste generation. According to the state statistical entity, says that about 462 million tons of waste have been generated in 2020. And there's a lot of talk about domestic waste disposal. What percent of domestic waste do you think has been recycled in any way? Sorry, what percent of the total amount of waste in 2020 is covered by domestic waste? It's just 2%. The rest is industrial waste, which is why we're having this conversation. How do we help industry to become this business that is an entity generating added value, generating jobs and opportunities. So we're facing a very difficult task. A lot of conversation has been ongoing in Ukraine on the circular economy. And what's great is that over the last year, I keep seeing more and more events that are not only focused on raising awareness of what the circular economy is, they're about specific examples of putting the circular economy into practice in Ukraine. And this is incredibly important. It's great that we're moving from theory to practical implementation. Right, so this panel discussion, which is called Waste Management Benefits and Opportunities, includes 5 brilliant experts who will help us to shape the puzzle of understanding the further path of putting circular economy in practice and managing waste properly. Yulia Makovecka will be talking about introducing the extended responsibility principle. Ms. Emma Danielson will be talking about waste mapping in Ukraine, and both of these initiatives are supported by EU for Environment. Then we will be talking with Vasil Sidor, the head of the Slavuta regional local community, which is a recipient of support under EU for Environment. And of course, we will have to have this discussion about tracking industrial waste, and Andrii will be talking about this using open data. And finally, Mr. Serhiy Kikot will be talking about financing for waste management projects in Ukraine. So it's an ambitious discussion, and despite our time limitations, I'm sure we're going to have a very efficient engagement and discussion. And it is now my pleasure to present Ms. Yulia Makovecka to you, who is the expert of the EU for Environment Action. She has supported us in terms of introducing the principle of extended producer responsibility. She's a PhD, a senior researcher at the Institute of Environmental Economics and Sustainable Development at the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. So please go ahead, Yulia, the floor is yours. Yes, greetings. So welcome to all of the participants of this event. I've been working with the issue of waste management for a very long time, and it pleases me to no end that this topic is now gaining a lot of traction, a lot of attention is devoted to it, both from the point of view of resource efficiency, using waste as resource, and from the environmental conservation point of view. Let's move on to the next slide. I'm sure you are well aware that the reform in the sphere of waste management is ongoing, and the first push towards this reform was the signing of the association agreement. That is when the key directives of the European Union were identified that Ukraine needs to implement as a top priority. This is the Framework Directive 2008-98, then the Directive on Waste Disposal and the Directive on Managing Waste from Extraction Industries. Also, there are relevant provisions in the Directive on Packaging, and when it comes to the sphere of environmental pollution, there is the Directive on Industrial Pollution. which also touches on the issue of integrated permits, as well as the issue of incineration and co-incineration of waste. It was after this that active work was initiated on implementing these directives in Ukrainian legislation. And the first step, if we can have the next slide, please. As the first step, the national strategy for waste management was developed in 2017, which seriously raised the issue of implementing circular economy principles in Ukraine. It states that the goal is to move towards the principles of circular economy, and these provisions clearly illustrated which policy documents, regulations need to be put in place in order to implement the above-mentioned directives. It highlighted the steps and the measures that need to be taken, and it was after this that the National Waste Management Plan was developed, which detailized, so to speak, the national strategy, indicated more clearly the implementation timelines, the responsible implementing parties, stating who's responsible for what. Unfortunately, we are in a position to state that the whole implementation process is somewhat stalling, both for the strategy and the action plan. The waste management project, the framework draft has been development. Some of the first steps were taken in 2014, then the draft was put aside, then the strategy and the action plan were developed, and then in 2019, it has been passed on to the Verkhovna Rada, to the parliament, and in 2020, it was accepted after its first reading. This was followed up by a discussion by stakeholders. A number of amendments were received. Over 1,000 suggestions were received, and it was for more than a year that the Environmental Committee of the Parliament addressed all of these suggestions. They drafted the draft table. The suggestions have been published, and well, the further destiny of this draft is not quite clear. Some of these suggestions are very significant in how they change the draft as compared to its original version. Some of the suggestions are probably improvements. So it's now the responsibility of the Environmental Committee. They need to come up with a balanced decision as to which suggestions will be taken into account, which will be declined. They need to come up with the finalized version ahead of the second reading, and they need to decide what the framework waste law will look like. It is the fact that it has not been adopted that is stalling a number of other initiatives as regards waste management in Ukraine. As I've mentioned before, we have a national action plan for waste management, and almost all of the regions currently have developed or are developing their regional waste management plans. This is a huge positive step in the right direction, since oblasts, regions, for the first time have been able to consider comprehensively their waste management system. If we're talking about domestic waste, or a certain region might see that industrial waste is more in the agenda for them, in order to be able to develop these regional plans, the regions had to run a large-scale mapping, inventorization, as we call it, of all of these waste types: domestic waste, packaging, electronic equipment, medical waste, all these types of categories, to see what their current situation is in terms of each waste stream, seeing their volume, whether they're somehow used, reused, or not, and then develop relevant steps as to how these waste streams can be addressed in the coming 10 years. We've stressed several times now that statistical data is difficult to come by in Ukraine, and this was the first piece of reality that the regions encountered. But this is also, in a way, a positive thing. The regions witnessed for themselves that they're lacking statistical information. So they directed a good deal of effort into receiving it from whoever is working with the waste, receiving viable reports. And many regions have now developed their waste management plans, but the question is that these plans cannot be properly approved as the framework law needs to be put in place. And since it isn't there yet, this activity has been stalled for a while. But still, this is a very positive step, since regions have run the mapping, they've outlined their plans, and the regions that are acting as pioneers, as front runners, they are using alternative pathways to implement these action plans. They are putting them in force as waste management plans at the local level. They are having their entities voting on them and implementing them. Also, in the recent years, a number of draft laws, of bills, have been developed that implement the principle of extended producer responsibility as regards several waste streams. Extended producer responsibility was meant to be reflected by the framework law, and the details, since different streams are quite different in terms of how need to be addressed, would be specified in the bylaws. So there would be relevant regulations for each of the streams. And there were bylaws developed for electronic waste, for batteries and accumulators, as well as for packaging materials. So it is currently the EU for Environment project that is working with the topic of implementing extended producer responsibility for packaging materials. Since this waste stream was the first one in the European Union to have extended producer responsibility applied to it. So the project identified the opportunities for implementing extended producer responsibility in Ukraine. It analyzed available bills that were available at that point, both the framework bill and the bill on packaging that was developed by the American Chamber of Commerce, along with international experts. So they provided their comments and recommendations as to these bills in terms of improving them and making them more efficient. Apart from this, also consultations were run with stakeholders, with representatives of large companies that manufacture packaged goods, the Ukrpack Association, and many others. Then a preliminary consultation workshop was organized where a number of key provisions were discussed regarding the packaging bill and its key provisions. The European Union also had a number of issues. In 2018, the packaging directive was amended, and the framework waste directive was also amended as part of the circular economy package. So a number of changes were introduced into the directive, which Ukraine obviously needs to respect in developing its legislation. And European experts talked about these new provisions, which are quite new both for the European Union and for Ukraine. And also a roadmap has been developed for implementing the extended producer responsibility system as regards packaging in Ukraine. Thus, we are in a position to state that a good deal of work has been undertaken, which has laid the groundwork, so to speak, for the legislative introduction of extended producer responsibility as regards certain waste streams. And we can say that businesses are hearing the new initiatives, especially under the aegis of the American Chamber of Commerce in 2019 and 2020. A step-by-step guide has been developed for implementing EPR as regards packaging, and they are now developing a project implementing EPR, not even waiting until the law will be put in place, to have the principle introduced in 2022. And I support this, and I hope this this initiative will be supported. I hope that the practice of, well, we can see that the practice of separated collection of wastes is implemented in Ukraine. Obviously, larger cities are doing a bit better in terms of this initiative, but still people seem to be arriving at an understanding that waste is still a resource and it needs to be used efficiently. So we have the groundwork, so to speak, to implement extended producer responsibility efficiently in Ukraine. And we hope that the introduction of the framework law and the sectoral pieces of legislation regarding various waste streams will allow to put in place a number of financial instruments as well, financial schemes that will increase resource efficiency in Ukraine and will ensure environmental protection. Thank you very much for your attention. Yes, thank you very much, Yulia. And to save time, I suggest, just as the previous moderator did, that you share your questions in the chat and we will address them either at the end of the panel discussion if we have the time, or I will then ask our participants, our speakers, to also share their answers in the chat.
Thank you for having me here to describe this project. I'm representing Sweco, and we're working together with the RECP and UNIDO in this waste mapping pilot project. So first I will introduce the scope and objective of the waste mapping. And as it has been mentioned before, we're working with 2 regions in Ukraine. It's Davidivska village territorial community and Slavota city territorial community. And for each of these regions, we have chosen to work with 4 waste types that we focus on in the waste mapping. And the objective of the waste mapping is to form a suitable method to map industrial waste, to be able to find possible improvements that reduce environmental impact. Besides Ukraine, simultaneous waste mapping pilots are taking place in Georgia and Azerbaijan. And what we hope to achieve in this ongoing waste mapping is to describe the current amounts and movements of the industrial waste in focus, to summarize the context for environmental improvements for the industrial waste, to visualize the amounts and movements of the waste as a baseline for improvements, and to help municipalities to support innovative waste management, to identify and quantify possible improvements within circular economy, and to provide recommendations for use in the Eastern Partnership countries, and using events with different stakeholders to spread the findings and the lessons learned as much as we can. And to do that, to identify the possible improvements towards circular economy and also to raise the awareness, we have used the waste hierarchy as a basis, and we have seen that several times already today. So we have used it to categorize waste streams as waste or to reuse or waste to recycling, etc. And we're trying to find ways to move upwards in this pyramid. So we're trying to save resources, both environmental and financial resources, through going upwards. For example, it's more efficient to use the material as reuse instead of recycling it. And it's even better if it's prevented and not created at all. So this is the basis. And I will show you some of the findings in the project so far. These are the waste amounts. They are reported by the industries in the 2 regions, and this is presented as tons per year. You can also see the focus waste types in Davidivska village territorial community, which is plastic, wood, organic waste, paper and card waste. And for Slavota, the focus waste are plastic, wood, paper and card, and ceramic waste. So this is the baseline data, waste per year, and I've also brought an example of a visualization. This example is wood waste in Davidivska village territorial community. And as you can see, wood waste is traveling to Lviv to be turned into pellets or wood chips. It's also going to Stare as to be used as bedding for horses. And it's also being used to create wood boards in Novovolynsk. Within Davidivska, it's used in household and companies as fuel. So This is the base that we use. This is the current situation, visualization that we use to find opportunities for improvement. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank the companies and the municipalities that has helped to find this information and to share it with the project, because without that information, it would not be possible to have the overview. And when we have the overview, we can see what opportunities there are for cooperation and for improvements and learning from other actors in the area. So besides this, we are summarizing it, and this is an example of how we summarize opportunities available for improvements. And we use this to discuss with municipalities and companies what could be done. So in this example, this shows opportunities for paper and cardboard waste in the Avdiivska village territorial community that is today going to landfill. So all of this waste that you see to the right is today paper and cardboard go to waste in this area. And at the top is one suggestion for how to prevent some of the waste of appearing at all, because a lot of the paper and cardboard waste is coming from packaging in general. So we're looking for ways to transport material without packing it in this single-use material, and trying to find ways to pack it that can be used for a longer time. If the first suggestion is not possible, the next best thing is to find ways to recycle the material, or at least at the bottom to use it as fuel in combustion. And right now we are discussing these suggestions with the companies and municipalities to be able to form recommendations that are quantified. So for each, from the discussions, we take out recommendations that seems most suitable, and we quantify them with financial opportunities and also environmental data. For example, how much carbon dioxide emissions per year can be saved if this action is performed for each recommendation. And that's to be able to prioritize among these recommended actions. So this is where we are in the project. I hope that you have some impression of how far we are, and I'm looking forward to see where we end up, and I hope for a fruitful cooperation also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. So yes, indeed, a forerunner project, and we will be very much eagerly expecting its outcomes. And we're not making a step very far from what Emma was talking about. We will now be having a conversation with the head of the Slavuta local community, which is a partner under this waste mapping initiative. So it is my huge pleasure now to invite Mr. Vasil Sidor to speak. So it's very important to hear the perspective of the local community head, the mayor, so to speak, who is to deal with waste management in the community. So Vasil will be delighted to hear what your experience, and we're asking you to stick to the time. Greetings, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you very well. Are you seeing the night skyline of Slavuta city? Yes, it was about 10 years ago that we were thinking about lighting. We used to say as soon as you have light, that civilization means you're moving in the right direction. So that's a bit of a done deal. It's a bit of an issue we addressed, and it's so nice to see everyone here, especially the colleagues that we are engaging with. Nice to see everyone who's been supporting us. So if you don't mind, I will briefly talk about the background and the fundamentals and some of the first steps that we've taken. And I will also talk about the interconnection between domestic waste, circular economy, mapping, etc. So here I've represented where the Slavuta city is located. We're a bit to the west of Ukraine. The city has existed, is mentioned for the first time in historical sources in 1617, and we've been granted Magdeburg right in 1633. So we've been a municipality for no less than for about 400 years, and this goes to show that Ukraine is a civilized European democratic country. But there were moments in time when we didn't really address the issue of waste. This has been the master plan on your screen. So moving on to how we are currently working with waste management. We have 137 sites across the city and 458 containers for waste. They're colored differently for the different kinds of waste. So this is preliminary sorting. This is the actual picture as is. So this is not our perspective. This is something that we've been working towards for a very long time. We've covered a number of stages. We've participated in training. And the most difficult stage was actually placing all of the 137 sites, ensuring that the city has proper capacities to sort our waste. It was important to ensure that everyone has a container available. These are the containers located in the rural areas. Our two villages are very responsible in addressing the waste management issues. In many ways, our village dwellers are more responsible than our city dwellers. This is the evolution of the containers. Anytime I talk about this to any of my colleagues, I always tell them to use the most recent containers, double lids, so don't repeat our mistakes. This is our old landfill, and we've been able to recultivate it with plants. This is the equipment that we procured. These are the different trucks, 18, 20, and 22 cubic meters. This is the GPS system that we use to track movements, and this is the picture of the current situation. These are the different signs, and they are marked reflecting the number of containers. We have 117 streets in the town, and people are not always eager to have containers next to their houses, but we've engaged with them productively, and we've covered the entire area. And this is probably the most important slide in my presentation, speaking specifically about the structure of domestic waste. So these are the issues that we're addressing, and this is where we need serious, steady support from professional partners, and we're receiving it. We have new challenges now, specifically dealing with organic waste, which now amounts to over 30% of the total waste generated. Some of the other types of waste are polymers, textiles, glass and ceramics, etc. It's important that at the first stage, the waste is sorted well, primarily, and we've achieved a certain positive results. But the next question is, what do we do with these sorted waste streams? And in this context, the circular economy, there's a bit of a joke here in Ukraine as to what the etymology of the work is, because it sounds a bit like the circular chainsaw. So anyway, the big question is, what do we do with our waste? And we have achieved agreements on plastic, glass, and paper, also partially on hazardous waste, which is sorted at all of our social institutions. It was just recently that one of our supermarkets, ATB, joined the initiative. So it's very important that the agent generating the waste should be responsible for collecting it and for disposing of it and recycling it. So everyone across the world across Ukraine can now bring their hazardous waste, their batteries and accumulators to ATB. So obviously the processing is somewhat primitive because PET is just processed and sent away. Then there's this innovation that we've put in place just recently. We have installed these containers where people can deposit their clothes and books. And then we have this no shop, ne magazine initiative. And you can arrive and buy yourself something for a very cheap price. And you can also leave your stuff, your clothes and books, etc. So obviously the target audience are people in need, so to speak, who need a bit of social support. This partially compensates their need, but it's also a very interesting concept culturally that has proved its efficiency. Well, and obviously the foundation of any sort of circular economy approach, you have to start working with young children. You need to educate them. Parents have to educate their children, and the educational system needs to cover this. And our children here at one of the kindergartens have been quite creative in making costumes for themselves using waste materials. And of course, we also have the youth council, and I'm very happy with them. Some 10 years ago, I was asked by parents, why are children cleaning up the streets? And I kept telling them, don't litter the streets, and then the children won't have to do it. And we're also engaging in green construction, in trying to improve our city as much as we can. So moving on to some of the challenges, you're well aware that there's legislation in place. There's huge responsibility for burning waste, for example, and similarly to other cities, we are using, for example, a wood shredder, a wood chipper, but we are looking for technologies as that would allow us to more productively work with organic waste and reuse it properly. We are learning now to compost waste. Speaking about organizational activities, we have signed an agreement with a number of other local communities, and we are now implementing this agreement. We have a directive signed by the Cabinet of Ministers on our project, waste management in communities of the Shepetivka district. And we also contributed a great deal to developing the regional waste management plan for the entire oblast, for the entire region. And Yulia has talked about this. Developing the plan is, of course, a great thing, but then coming up with the financing to implement it is another one. And you need to make sure that these systems are sustainable, that these solutions are payable. And we engaged with French experts, with European companies to develop this plan. And I will not be talking about this in too many detail. I will just clearly demonstrate what's been suggested. So the region has been divided into 3 clusters, the northern, central, and the south regions. Then there are suggestions as to where waste management facilities need to be placed and where waste transfer stations should be placed. So the whole infrastructure is developed, waste is properly collected, then it's loaded onto a heavy-duty vehicle, which then delivers it to a disposal site. And here's the design, very well developed, of a waste disposal site, and it emulates best European practices. But here's probably the most important conversation. You need about 3 billion hryvnias to cover these initiatives. Are communities in a position to cover these expenses? I'm afraid not. The situation is they're not in a position, but this clearly outlines what we need to be working on. We have, so to speak, ground under our feet. We feel confident, but in order to be able to put all of these ideas in practice, we need to engage with companies such as those that have been speaking today. We have been selected now to work under the circular economy and new growth opportunities component of the EU for Environment project. I want to say thank you sincerely. It's a huge pleasure to be working with you all. It's important that companies, businesses have now reached a higher level of trust. They get engaged with the process and they are learning. For example, we have this company Aquarodos and Rodors, a company manufacturing doors using wood. So all of the waste that they have is used by their boiler house. They're not using natural gas anymore, and they are able to provide heat for their manufacturing for their manufacturing premises. And the extra waste is used to produce pellets, which can be later used elsewhere. So they have a completely closed cycle manufacturing approach. This is a clear reflection of the circular economy. But companies like this will need governmental support, and they need to receive at least partial compensation for what they're doing. They are a powerful investor here in Slavuta, and their efforts demonstrate that the closed loop is something that you need to put in place. Completely avoiding waste is sometimes impossible when you're working with wood, but here's a positive example. Then another example is the Slavuta Malt House, one of the strongest investors in the company. It's a French enterprise, and they are using bio waste, obviously, from producing malt. So 50% of this waste is currently reused, replacing gas. So again, we're talking about millions of cubic meters of gas. Another company working with ceramic products, it's another French company investing a great deal in modernizing their production and supporting the community thus. And it's in this process of our engagement, they are now reusing ceramic tiles, broken ceramic tiles. So they reintroduce these scraps into their manufacturing process. There's also gypsum that they're using, etc. So there's a lot to talk about. We're also working on establishing a new waste disposal site. So we are constructing this site. I've represented it here just very briefly. This is enough for you to understand what I'm talking about. So we're going to introduce a sorting line at the waste disposal site. I don't want to go back to the slide, which reflects the structure, the qualitative composition of our waste. We are establishing collaboration with a number of educational institutions, and we've signed engagement agreements with 12 of those. We were working on based on memoranda of understanding. It was just last week that we've held a meeting at the Lutsk National Technical University with their management. We visited the Lviv Polytechnic Institute, their Institute for Strategic Development, and we are working with universities, with the Academy of Sciences. We are looking for ways to come up with new solutions for extending the life cycle of materials, of waste. How do we extract added value from waste? You know, we're not your Kyiv city with millions of residents. We're limited in our resources. We want to engage companies, not large ones, but that will allow us to process waste. If we're talking about textiles, there are capacities and there are technologies available in Ukraine where you can process 2 to 3 tons of textile waste. We used to have a paper factory and we used to manufacture cigarette paper, but this is not in need anymore. So the issue is, how do you utilize waste? I'm just giving you a single example here. So we need to find properly scaled solutions, which is why we're engaging with national institutions, with European experts, and we're going to be grateful for any suggestions in terms of processing and remanufacturing, reusing all of our waste types, plastic, textiles, etc. So I will probably not dwell too much on the specific companies that are working here. And finally, just a few words about the city. As you can see, we are surrounded by beautiful nature with woods and lakes, and it's important for us that we do not hurt the natural environment around ourselves, that the oasis is preserved, and that we continue to enjoy this positive environment. We want to make sure that our life is enjoyable and that it stays enjoyable for generations to come. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vasil. Your experience is breathtaking and motivational. I can see congratulations and compliments to you in the chat. There are also questions for you, but if you don't mind, I will reserve them for the ending of our panel discussion, just to make sure that everyone is able to speak, while you, Vasil, can take the time to have a quick look at the questions. So, as illustrated by the example of the Slavuta community, it's clear how important it is to map and to track your waste, to have reliable data on the qualitative composition of your waste streams, which is why it's important to have a conversation about collecting data, sourcing data. And I would like to invite to speak now, perhaps the best expert on open data, Mr. Andrii, specifically environmental open data. He is the CEO and the data analyst at the Waste Ukraine Analytics startup, and he will be talking about open data on waste and the circular economy. So, Andrii, please go ahead. The floor is yours. Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Can you see me well? Is everything okay? That's great. All right, then we'll try to kick this off. So my name is Andrii. For those of you who are not acquainted with me, I am the CEO of Waste Ukraine Analytics. And for the last 4 years, I've been training people on open data. I support local governments, public officials to become more literate when it comes to working with open data. And I always start each of my presentation with this famous quote by the American economist who was responsible for developing Japan's economy after the war, who said that without data, you're just another person with an opinion. To be able to arrive at positive managerial solutions, you need reliable data. And on the next slide, we will see the formal definition of what open data is, but I love this simplified definition that you see on your slide. Is open data is an invitation for anyone, anywhere, at any time to join the life of their city, country, or a specific company. Now, the formal definition is on your screens right now. This is public information that allows for its automated processing through electronic means, which is available free of charge and openly, and can be used further. This might be a bit of a difficult definition to introduce at the very beginning, but most importantly is that the data should be processable by automated means, by computers. So what you see represented here is public information, right? Traditional paper-based archives that store a good deal of data, but this data is not open because it isn't electronic. Here you have a service based on open data, a map maybe, similar to the one that the previous speaker represented, showing where the various containers are located across the country. But this is not open data yet. So the most common technical formats for open data in Ukraine is comma-separated values, CSV, then JSON, JavaScript object notations, and XMLs, extensible markup language files. You might not be familiar with them. It's fine because these are technical details, but I'm quite sure that most of you will understand very well what data in table format is. That's an Excel table, an Excel spreadsheet, and then there's your hierarchical structure where you have parent-child relations between the various objects, and JSON and XML files allow to store information on this kind of stuff. This is the desired, these are the desired formats that we should be striving for, specifically also in the waste management sphere. There are a number of laws in Ukraine regulating access to open data, regulating access to data in general, which in one way or another refer to the concept of open data. But the main defining document that I would like to talk about is the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine Resolution number 835, which talks specifically about open data, its administrators, its access principles. And I would like to focus on 3 important principles today. The first principle says that all data that the administrator administrates should be open by default. So unless this information is classified, It's a state secret. It must be published, and access to it should be open. The next important principle is that the information available to the administrator should be published in its primary non-aggregated form. So each report, each item of individual reporting by businesses must be published as they were received. And this will allow for higher quality analysis. And then the next important principle is availability of use. We keep saying that this published information must be computer readable, machine readable. It should be presented in the right format, allowing to feed the data into analytical tools and allowing it to be further processed. The Cabinet of Ministers resolution also mentioned that there are data sets of high value, which are exceptionally valuable for the public, and information on environment and on waste is also seen as high value data sets. And the resolution stipulates that information on environment and environmental protection is a priority direction for state policy in the area of open data. So we may expect that all issues relating to the environment, to waste, anything that will help us build the circular economy model, this data will become more and more available. And I would like to briefly start by talking about these sets published by the Ministry of Environment. So these sets are represented here. They are supposed to publish declarations on waste, data from regional registries, data on licenses issued. It's incredibly important that this information is published. And technically, it is represented at the Unified State Open Data Portal, where you can log in to download the data sets. And if we're talking specifically about the list of declarations, it includes a number of databases where the information is stored in a regular Excel table. And here the data on the company is represented, the date when the declaration was provided, and all of the other data. So this is a table representation of data stored in the declarations that companies submit. So here's an example of a declaration. This is what it looks like. It's a PDF document. It includes information on how much of what kind of waste has been passed to whom. And this helps you understand the morphology of wastes. Now, talking about local self-government, local government entities, the resolution mentions that data on the location of municipal containers and data on the location of waste management entities must be published by local government entities. And we saw, as exemplified by Mr. Vasilisider, that his community is obviously engaging in this, but I want to stress that it is mandatory in line with current law. The regulation also stipulates that where there is a large amount, a level of a high level of public interest, where lots of requests are received, entities may address government institutions requesting that certain types of information be published. So even where it is not mandatory, this enables the administrators to generate their own data sets. Now, speaking about the unified system, the Ministry of Environment is establishing a single platform that will include all information on environmental conditions. So a large number of resources will be, registries, over 70, will be compiled in one place. Now, moving on to the circular economy, the actual topic of today's meeting, I'm sure that you've all arrived at the conclusion, and I'll try to address another facet of the circular economy concept. So the European Commission's point of view is the circular economy is an irreversible global megatrend. We need to accept it, and we need to prepare, we need to adapt towards implementing these issues in our communities. I always share this slide as an example of a most innovative solution with containers that have sensors in them, communicating their level of fulfillment, so to speak. And this is an example of a very nice technological solution in the linear economy, where we expect to end up with waste. Products are generated, they are consumed, but in the end, we receive waste. And currently, Ukraine is facing a shift towards the recycling economy. Companies are being constructed to reprocess materials, but our ultimate goal is to arrive at the circular economy condition, where waste is eliminated entirely or it is generated in minimal amounts. So representing the national economy, we all understand that there are raw materials, extracted materials, then there's a certain amount of import of materials or goods that are received by the economy. They contribute to the creation of new products, which are consumed by businesses and the population. And once they are used, most of these materials are lost. Only a few products continue lasting. And I would want one of the conclusions of today's events today to be that we're having a conversation about materials rather than goods and items. As it was exemplified by the previous speaker's presentation, we were talking about materials, plastics, ceramics, etc. And our work comes down to representing this whole process from a centric point of view in terms of data. We need data on what we produce, what materials we use, how our products are delivered to the users, what happens once they stop using it. We need to ensure that the flow of materials is extended as possible, as much as possible. And for this, the European Union and the Eurostat has a framework collecting circular economy indicators. These indicators we have actually submitted as the suggestion for the strategy of open data 2021-2025 in Ukraine for our entities to also collect this relevant data. So as you can see on the screen, we're talking about manufacturing and consumption, everything that has to do with waste management, with secondary materials management. And the previous speaker talked about an interesting issue. There's a block focused on the number of patents that relate to waste management and recycling. So it is very nice that the Slavuta community is reaching out to research institutions. So as a result, the European Union has data sets that are compiled into categories, and I'm sure that Ukraine should be generating the same data sets for itself. Apart from this, there are other approaches where businesses can demonstrate their responsibility, their extended responsibility, not only when it comes to sustainable packaging, but also to using renewable energy. They can virtualize certain aspects. They can implement other business models that have to do with leasing their products as opposed to selling and buying them. So your most typical question is, do you need a drill or do you need a hole in the wall? The manufacturer would probably be interested in selling drills, but for the end user, it's probably better to lease it, right? So you have a complete reimagining of the business model, and many worldwide brands are now putting these business models in place. We need to establish an environment for Ukrainian businesses to engage in the same. Right, so for several years, we've been working in Waste Ukraine Analytics. We try to collect as much information as possible on waste, and we are developing a service for local government entities to be able to access this data, to be able to generate mandatory data sets. And this is also available for businesses. We are developing a marketplace for companies in the sphere of waste management based on historical data that we are aware of in order to be able to implement what the previous speaker was talking about. When you know that there's a certain type of waste, what is the applicable technology? It's this that the platform will help you with. For this, investors need to know what the options are and to be able to start these conversations. One of the main conclusions that I would want you to take with you: open data is data primarily for machines. As soon as we have sufficient information resources for analysis, then we will be able to more efficiently impact all of these processes, and we will be in a position to faster move towards the circular economy at the regional, sub-regional, and national level, both for businesses and for end users. Here's my contact data. Feel free to reach out to become friends on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I'll be very happy to address your questions in the comments. I hope I didn't take too much time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Andrii. That was great. It's very difficult to present everything you have to say in the limited time that you are allotted. So I kindly ask all of the participants to get in touch with our speakers, perhaps beyond this event, and also feel free to share your questions in the chat. Thank you very much to Vasil, who has answered all of the questions in the chat that were addressed towards him. So please have a look at the chat. As hard as we're trying to compensate in terms of time, we're falling behind, but I'm still very grateful for everyone, to everyone for making an effort to stick to the regulations. Andrii, you know, I've been following your activities for a while now, and I'm very pleased with how well you're doing. Being a startup, you are shaping an entire business niche, and that is great. Thank you very much. So colleagues, please feel free to hit Andrii with questions. And we're finishing this conversation with a very important issue. Where do you come up with the money? Funding sources for waste management efforts for resource-efficient cleaner production are different. And Vasil has already addressed a few issues, and then Yulia Makovecka talked about this. And let's hear what banks think. So we're joined here by Serhiy Kikoit, head of the Department for Coordination with Public Authorities of the Unit for Environmental Reengineering and the Implementation of Resource-Saving Projects at Ukrgazbank. Will talk about financing options for waste management initiatives in Ukraine. It's great to have banks that are interested in this issue, and Ukrgazbank is the leader, the Green Bank of Ukraine. So let's have it. Serhiy, take it away. Yeah, greetings, everyone. Thank you very much to everyone, to the participants and to the organizers. This has been an incredible event and focusing on a very interesting topic. It is true that Ukrgazbank is the leader when it comes to green financing. We've been focusing on this topic since 2016. And now I'm going to share my presentation with you and we'll go ahead. Right, so since 2016, we have engaged in financing green projects. We focus on renewable energy, energy efficiency, resource efficiency. But it was clear at some point, it became clear at some point that you need to address this issue more globally. And so in 2020, the bank extended its green bank concept to the sustainable bank concept. We are now focused on sustainable development goals, focusing on saving resources and ensuring that our environment is sustainable for the future generations. And we are supporting the transfer to circular economy, and we see waste management as a very important stepping stone, which foresees a smart approach in dealing with waste. I want to stress that all banks are, in one way or another, engaged in supporting projects with a view to making a profit, but our bank, along with international partners, is looking at how a project can not only provide return on investment, but can also address issues, resolve problems when it comes to waste management, supporting the circular economy as well. So the bank has already financed over the last 5 years more than 800 environmental projects to a total cost of 30 billion hryvnias, which has contributed to a reduction in CO2 emissions and to an improvement in the condition of the environment, which is one of our goals, obviously. So the CO2 emission reduction amounts to 1.5 million tons. Let me mention a few of our advantages. Why is it us specifically that you should address? We are the only Ukrainian bank with its own technical office with experts who are in a position to support you in terms of implementing the project. We run a complex assessment. We do not only look at the profitability and at the return on investment, we also consider the environmental impact that the project will have. We can run a calculation, and based on the impact factor, we can reduce the interest rates that we will offer to the project. So outlining some of the priority waste management areas for us, we eagerly support projects to construct waste processing plants, initiatives in the area of waste logistics, sorting and disposal, or processing secondary materials. These are our priorities, but of course, we do not limit ourselves to these initiatives. So some of the main financing instruments would include investment loans for up to 5 years, the 579% loan program. And the main advantage of specifically this program is that it targets small and medium enterprises, and it offers reduced interest rates. So you can arrive at an interest rate, for example, of 7%. And if certain provisions are met, you can also hit it down to 5%. Another program is financial leasing. Here's a new direction, which is nice as no collateral is required. There's also the EBRD's program, EU for Business. And the main advantage is that after the investment phase is finished, the construction phase is finished, a cashback of 10 to 15% can be obtained. Then another interesting initiative is financing under the UNIDO project. We engage with the loan guarantee fund, and we love this project very much in terms of providing loans. And then the final one is replenishing the working capital of companies. And I would like to focus our attention a little on providing loans to municipalities where no collateral is required, no commissions are charged, and the minimal amount is 5 million hryvnias. So we're talking about larger projects here. The key conditions for financing for loans is the decision from the Ministry of Finance on approving the volume and condition for a local loan, and also a local development budget needs to be in place. And I want to refer you to the QR code link if you wish to know more about this program specifically. There's a separate presentation on it available. Now, what are the advantages of financial leasing and why it might be interesting for businesses? It's great that you don't need additional collateral. The deal can be done much more quickly, and there's a minimal first payment, which is 20%. As one of the colleagues of mine stressed, there are loans available under the UNIDO project, which supports energy efficiency and optimizing energy consumption. The amount is $150 per project, or the equivalent in any other currency. The currency doesn't matter. How is this program interesting? You don't need a collateral. There are no expenses on striking the deal, and it is with support from our UNIDO colleagues, free of charge. Consultations and training events can be provided on implementing energy management in line with ISO 15001. So obviously more information is available if you follow the link in the QR code. So what do you need to receive a loan? First of all, you need to come up with a project. You need to come up with a business plan for this initiative. And there's essentially a required basic document package that you need to develop. Then you will need a presentation on your current financial performance. And this will be enough for us to initiate the preliminary consideration of the application. So we're always ready to get in touch to start a dialogue. And I have a few examples, a few cases selected here. We're talking about waste logistics. As you can see, the bank supported, depending on the case, we've provided from 70 to 75% of the funds required to implement the project. Depending on the customer's need, we might be discussing either loans or leasing. So we're open to discussion. Another interesting case on waste management, which is completely in line with the circular economy principles, was this project to finance the collection, transportation, and processing, as well as disposal of waste, which allowed to save natural resources and thus contributes to environmental protection. When you use, we were supporting this initiative to use old concrete, old asphalt to produce new road covers. And again, we covered 80% of the necessary expenses under this project. A few other interesting initiatives. We've supported the construction of a power plant using waste. In this particular case, the waste is sunflower husk. In order to, well, and the overall goal is to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. The plant's capacity is 16 megawatt. Another interesting case here that I would like to present is procuring the technological lile to manufacture plastic slabs, and PET bottles were used as secondary raw materials. Also, I wanted to show you that we are ready to finance all sorts of projects, both large and smaller ones. The second one represented here was the project to procure a shredder for wood, where we provided about 0.3 million hryvnia of financing. Right. So in view of the limited time, that will be it from me. Feel free to reach out, send an email, and we're always ready to engage and always ready to support you financially. Thank you very much, Serhiy. There is a question to you, which you have essentially addressed. So who do you get in touch with to get a loan? So we reached out to you using this email, right? Yes, that's correct. Thank you so much. So overall, the time of the event is now up, but I see that there are questions for Ukrgazbank. If we could address them very quickly. Does Ukrgazbank finance the construction of waste disposal sites? So obviously, there will always be disposal waste. So are you ready to engage with the construction of waste disposal sites? We need to consider each project in more detail. We need to have a look at the business plan. A lot depends on the nature of the waste, because there's the environmental aspect here. So I won't be able to give you a generalized answer. Each case needs to be considered separately. We need to consider the environmental impact. And so your contacts are available on the website. So you feel free to reach out. Right, everyone, colleagues, thank you so much to all of the panelists. The questions have been addressed in the chat now, and I would like to conclude this panel discussion by not only expressing my gratitude to the participants and the speakers, I also want to turn everyone's attention to the fact that an ecosystem to support circular economy is being developed in Ukraine. We have financing institutions, we have experience at the level of local communities, at the level of businesses, and what we need to do now is multiply, scale this example up. The more business cases we have, the sooner we will move from a pilot stage to a trending stage, where circular economy will be a definitive trend. Right, with this, I am concluding this panel discussion, and I want to pass the floor back to the overall moderator, Katerina Romanova. Katerina, please go ahead. Yes, thank you very much, Elena. Thank you so much to the participants for incredibly interesting presentations. And we are moving on to the closing section of the National Conference. And to conclude, I would like to invite Mr. Andrii Vorfolomeiev, Director of the Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Center, to speak. Please go ahead, Andrii. Thank you, Katerina. And I want to start by saying thank you to all of the participants, to all of the speakers, and to all of the listeners, the attendees who have stayed until the very end. I think we can arrive at the conclusion that the topic is incredibly interesting, is definitely relevant, and next time we will probably try to divide the two topics into two separate events. Both panel discussions have been incredibly interesting, and you wanted to pose questions and to hear answers, but we will have been limited on time. Today's event actually coincides with the 6th Eastern Partnership Summit that is taking place in Brussels, where leaders of the European Union countries and Eastern Partnership countries are discussing the EU's support in main sectors such as the environment, governance, digitalization, and civil society development. And based on the previous summits, the green transition is one of the big priorities for the European Union and for the Eastern Partnership countries. We are being consistently supported by the EU in moving towards this direction. So it is probably our task to make the best use of this support and perform the transition as quickly as possible. Any sort of modernization, any sort of transformation leads to new challenges for businesses. And it is with the government's support, with support from the European Union, we need to arrive at a vision where we see this not as challenges, but as opportunities, where we implement new approaches towards production and implement new approaches towards the circular economy. I hope our event has been another stepping stone, has been another helpful event in terms of raising the awareness of our businesses, of our local communities, of our government entities. And it is under this program, EU for Environment, which has brought us together here. I'm sure we will have follow-up activities across the coming years. We will have targeted support to both companies and local communities. So stay in touch, follow the updates, visit our websites. There's the EU for Environment website, the EU Delegation website, and of course, we ourselves will be reaching out to engage with you. We will be engaging with companies to assess their carbon footprint and lots of other activities. So there's still a lot to do, a lot of ground to cover. It's very important that we understand the criticality of these issues. It's nice that we're having these discussions here, that we have the first examples to consider in Ukraine. So let's keep going. There is still a lot of work to be done, and I have no doubt we will be hearing from each other very soon, having discussions on other topics. So thank you very much for spending the time with us.